Chapter 1, Chapter 01, Flames of the End. The small snowflakes were slowly descending through the dark sky in the middle of February. The supplementary class schedule had barely come to an end. That young student who had devoted his time to studies like many others in the country could now finally return home. There was nothing special about the young man. Slim build, black and slightly wavy hair, glasses to cover his visual problems, and under his eyes long dark circles under his eyes, the product of long hours of study. Ah! Exhaled the young man in his hands, looking for some warmth for his cold hands while carrying a small bag with a lonely hamburger for dinner. The days are getting longer and longer and my hands are getting fuller, only a few months left to finally graduate. I'll be a college student in no time and then I can enjoy life a little more. Sigh, why does everything have to be so hard? The young man asked himself as he walked and checked his phone in search of information for his next few days of studies. University exams were near. ZSSS. The strange sound and the surprising heat wave stopped the young man's walk. The young man's attention led him to look in a specific direction where there were many people gathered shouting. The young man's feet slowly brought him closer to the place. A two-story house on fire came out. Lamented the young man, returning to the phone to send some messages when he heard it. Help! Hey! Hearing the voice so close but at the same time so far away, the young man turned around to see the flames once again. He looked all around but there was nothing to point him to the above. Lack of sleep is getting to me. Help me please! Again. The young man's head turned all around to locate the voice calling him. It was like a whisper in his ear, but at the same time it was as if a person was calling him from afar. Mom, it hurts. The young man could hear the voice again, but unlike the previous times he could find the direction from which the voice came. It wasn't difficult after all, his attention had already been focused once on the place. Yes, that fire. It's a girl. A man to one side of the young man had whispered without taking his attention off the fire. My daughter. Another heartbreaking scream came from a man with tears in his eyes who was trying to enter the building but was stopped by two other people. That man stretched his arms trying to reach something, but only the air was close. Those around knew it. That man was the father of the girl inside the flames. No one entered because everyone was afraid, and the reason said that the girl should not be alive, either by fire or by carbon monoxide, but the young man knew it was not so. It could not be so after all. He listened to her. I am afraid. The young man still did not understand what was going on in his mind, but he had no time to think. His heart had begun to beat faster with each passing second. His hands were shaking and for some reason he could not stop smiling. Finally he took the first step, that step that would define his future, his great future in the world. He finally ran out into the flames as he heard the screams of the surrounding people shouting for him to stop. Entering the main room was easy. There were flames everywhere, but I could still differentiate the different places. I didn't know the house, but somehow I felt that everything was a map. He knew where the girl was. He could see her on the second floor behind a wall. She was a silhouette wrapped in light blue, as if she was inside a video game with a tracking ability. That way, said the same, following the strange light blue dots on the floor. The latter had disappeared. Thinking at this moment was not the forte of the young man. The truth was he did not have the time to stop to think and simply took steps back to jump and hold on to a beam at the top. As a young student he knew that sport was necessary. His body was firm as a rock. Only a jump was enough to be on his way to the second floor. Already on the second floor it was a little more difficult to move. Everything was made of wood, so everything was unstable, not to mention that it was full of smoke. Where are you? There was no answer, making the young man's mind panic as he imagined that the girl who was looking for help might now be dead. He moved fast around the place trying to look for the girl, but to no avail. Where is she? He asked himself, trying to hold his breath and covering himself from the flames. In his moment of desperation he could finally see her again, wrapped in that light blue aura again there. He wasn't surprised. He really didn't have time to be surprised. Right now he had more things to do. The girl had her eyes closed and was in a corner of the room behind the TV. Come here, said the young man, lifting the girl to start her heroic escape. Getting out of the room was not complicated, but now going down to the second floor seemed impossible. there was no way out, and that strange feeling or power did not seem to help him. The first thing in the young man's gaze was a window, and that was his destination. Now he could see the crowd and they were looking at him with fear. The young man pointed to the girl in his arms and the people immediately understood what he wanted. All the people got into position to catch the girl who would be thrown. There was no way of knowing if that action would end well or not, but there was no time to think about anything else. She needed help and the smoke was not friendly. "Here we go," complained the young man, throwing the girl as the floor beneath his feet gave way to the fire. "Ah!" shouted the young man before falling into the fire along with the entire second floor. The girl in need of rescue was already outside, but he himself was now the victim. The debris had him buried and the fire was beginning to consume him. The screams of pain were nothing more than another fuel, just like his clothes, his hair, and even his skin. The young man could feel his body burning, he felt his skin burning and he began to lose sensation. He lost oxygen because of the smoke and his vision became increasingly blurry. You, moaned the young man one last time, and he could see, due to the strange ability, that many people wrapped in celestial aura were running towards him, but it was too late. The darkness chased away all light in his vision and the immense pain in his body quickly disappears. There was no way to act positively to what was happening, but he was not oblivious to the situation. It was a normal topic among youthful conversations. Death was finally approaching his door, the end of his path. Chapter 2, Chapter 02, From the Dream. Far from the fire and far from that city where neither people nor the weather itself could influence, in an old mansion almost forgotten by the moonlight. Ugh, complained a young man in the middle of the night inside a luxurious but disheveled room. Ah! The boy's eyes opened in the middle of the darkness with a slight scream. It took him no time at all to take off the blanket and sit up in bed. The young man's breathing was agitated and on his face was sweaty due to the psychological impact of what he was seeing in his sleep. Out of nowhere appeared a humanoid figure with a thin build, bat-like ears and bulging eyes. "Young Rosier," exclaimed the figure, "a house elf belonging to the Rosier family." "Verona," said the young man with a gasp, looking at the elf next to him. The elf himself looked worried and fearful. That elf handed a glass with water in the hands of his master. "Another dream, young Rosier, it's just another dream. Here and drink, it will help with the nightmare." This one was different, this one was not like the others. "I can remember everything. I could feel everything." The young Rosier put his hands on his body. "It's like I was another person, I had another name and everything was different. Me. I think I need to rest, I need to go back to sleep." Sure, Master William must rest. Verona is only disturbing the young master's sleep. Verona will disappear right now." It was only enough that he snapped his fingers for the elf to disappear, and with him the candle, making the darkness return. The young man sat on the edge of the bed and put his hand on his head. He touched his hair, then touched his face and finally touched his chest. "The same dream again," he said to himself. "I am no longer a normal student, I am no longer burning, now I am William Asmodeus Rosier. POV William. Every night I am haunted by the memories of my death. I have only been here for 4 months since I reincarnated, or well, inherited the memories of my previous self, I mean my past life as a normal student in the 21st century. The first day I woke up in this new body I was scared and tried to act normal, but I was quickly discovered by Verona." I explained the situation a bit by saying that I had dreams of another life, a truth to some extent. The fact is that my death was painful and I always remember it when I sleep. Now my name is William Rosie, son of Evan Rosie, one of Voldemort's Mortifagos henchmen, and yes, I am in the fantastic world of Harry Potter. I wasn't really a fan of the saga, but I know a few specifics. The specific fact is the family and my magic. I still don't feel anything special inside me, and that's mainly because I'm a child, or so I think. I don't really understand everything that happens. I can't adapt to this huge castle and a dysfunctional family. I'm the youngest of 5 brothers, all talented regarding magic, but I feel a big gap towards myself, supposedly due to my apparent lack of magic. I don't think I can sleep again. I really think I need to go to the bathroom. Due to the custom of early life, it was impossible to get used to using a portable toilet being mandatory to head to a proper bathroom. Due to the dimensions of the large castle, it was difficult for me to get there the first few days, but before long I discovered. No, rather I rediscovered that rare ability that appeared in my past life just before I died. When I use it, everything around me becomes visible, and I can even see what is on the other side of the walls, as if I were using the sight of a bat, or rather as if I were using one of those video game skills to detect things in the surroundings. Sure, I can only see 10 meters around me, but it's already more than I could ask for. I decided to call it mind's eye. The truth, when the mind's eye woke up in this world, I was quite surprised. I mean, in my previous life I had never heard of something similar in a human, and also in all the movies I could see I didn't see something like that in the Harry Potter world either, so I can assume that it is my own ability. I can say that my life is not that bad, or well, in a way it is a bit better than my previous life. I am a kid, minus point, but I don't have to work extra shifts in a burger shop anymore, which is a plus point. Now there are more people in my house, plus point. The people around me have a pretty creepy and evil tinge to them, minus point. Yes, I live in one of the oldest wizarding houses in England, as I said before, the Rosier House, which certainly has a great fame due to the most alarming events in the history of magic. Vinder Rosier, follower of Gellert Grindelwald, Evan Rosier and Rosier himself, participants in the ranks of Voldemort during the First Magical War. The Rosier family is important but not positively famous, and Rosier himself is not very affectionate with the family. I am his grandson, but since reincarnation I have not seen him once, and according to Verona he should not attract much attention. He is not a nice person. My mother, on the other hand, has a cold look. She is a tall and slender woman, obviously a pure blood witch coming from the Parkinson family, another family belonging to the Holy 28, her name Abby Rosier, née Parkinson. My older brother, the first son of the Rosier family, is called Marcus Rosier, recently graduated from Hogwarts and is in charge of the family business. If I'm not mistaken, he had honors at the time of graduation. Next is my sister Leslie Rosier, a fifth-year witch specializing in transformations and a feared genius in the field of enchantments. My mother favors her in every way possible. Then follow twins Jessica and Damien Rosier. As I said, they are twins and both are good Quidditch players. They are also good in potions classes. Finally there is my position, the fifth in the family branch and the last of the children. I don't have a specialty yet, but I have the mind's eye as my backup. Yes, I am consoling myself. Chapter 3, Chapter 03, A Miracle. I still don't feel anything. If I keep this up I'll end up a squib. William looked at his palm as it was slowly being closed. His expression was not very inspiring and sometimes pitiful. It had been 5 weeks since he had the dream of fire, and he had tried countless times to wake up or feel the magic, but every time it was a failure. It was as if the magic was avoiding him. William was losing his cool. The deadline for the arrival of the letters was approaching and he himself had no magic at all. It would be a failure. Inside the Rosie mansion was a library, and William had read every single book inside looking for an answer, but to no avail. "I guess I won't be a wizard," muttered William under his breath, stretched out on the floor of his room staring at the ceiling. "I tried everything from magic circles to potions, but nothing at all. It wasn't enough that I had wasted all my efforts in my first life sacrificing myself to save a girl, but I was also reincarnated into a world of magic but without the ability to use it in my own way. I am simply a colossal-sized failure. I only wanted magic, but what did I get?" William looked at his palm as his zone of vision was extended and everything seemed to be intangible, even walls seemed to be invisible. "I only have the ability to see beyond the human eye. Useless." Within William's space of vision he could see one of the house elves of Castle Rosier. There was nothing unusual, but every time these little humanoids disappeared they left behind a small trail of light that at the end were particles of a silvery color. Surprised by what he observed, William left the room and ran out while using his mind's eye to see everything around him. When he reached the kitchen he could notice the particles much more present. The house elves had to pass through the kitchen several times in the day, so there would be traces of their aura left in it, and William could see that aura. "Magic," William muttered excitedly, watching the particles slowly disappear, merging with the surroundings. House elves were shrouded in the silver aura, and humans, as in the case of the girl in her previous life, were shrouded in a light blue aura. William was not an idiot and could come to the conclusion easily, but now he had another doubt. What is the color of the wizard's aura? He asked himself with his hand on his chin. It was not difficult to discover the aura, since fortunately there was another wizard in the house, old Rosier, who was also the lord of the house. Drowned in the illusion and excitement of being a wizard, William moved through the corridors of the castle, always in the direction of his target. When he reached the place, his footsteps became quieter and the speed was greatly reduced. No one could blame him, after all he was spying on a former dark wizard. Not many aurors dare to do so, but Will was ignorant of that. Can he detect my mind's eye? Is he even aware of how close I am? What will happen if he catches me right now? Those were the questions that were on the boy's mind. In search of hope for a bright future, even though he was unsure, he resigned himself to the abandonment of his last glimmer of hope. He simply let out his area of vision. He had to see the old man, but his mind's eye had limits. He knew it, and the old man was beyond expectation. He could circle the room, but nothing ensured he was anywhere near the walls. After all, he was an old fox. William clenched his fists in fury and put all his effort into extending his field of vision a little, just a couple of meters more to be able to see the aura. William's teeth gnashed before the field was extended, but it only took a couple of centimeters to see it. He couldn't see the old man's entire body, but at least one of the old man's feet was within his zone, and that was enough. He could now see the red-colored aura overflowing from the old man's body. The mind's eye shut down by inertia, and William could feel the fatigue building up in his mind. Also, his body was full of sweat. It was the first time he forced the mind's eye to see beyond the limit. By the time he made it all the way to the room, he had recovered slightly and the dizziness was gone. Now at the very least he had no fear of falling, plus he had a more important mission and no time for rest. William sat cross-legged on the floor, closed his eyes and extended his field of vision once again, this time with another particular objective. Since he had arrived in this new world and discovered that the rare ability was with him, he began to experiment, but could only discover a few pointed things, among them the fact that it signals the things William desires, and right now this feature was needed. Magic! Muttered William, slowly picturing in his mind the red particles he saw from the old man. Just as William had requested, those particles now showed around him as if they were tiny snowflakes or dust in the sunlight. William's expression had a big smile, remarking his daisies and dark eyes. He was happy. It was the first time he had smiled since he came to his second life. William didn't know what to do now. He had no idea what step to take, as there was no guide for what he was doing and it was never mentioned in the movies. This was just magic. Without waiting any longer, William reached out his arm towards the particles until he touched one with the tip of his finger, and like a lantern all the particles rushed into him. William could feel how his insides felt warm, and so he could finally feel the magic. William's first contact with magic in 2 lifetimes. Chapter 4, Chapter 04, A Simple Talk. As soon as William finished gathering the magic in his body, he felt the fatigue. He had used his mind's eye many times in a short period of time, and gathering magic from the surroundings to awaken his own magic was basically an act beyond expectations. There were no records of other mages doing something similar, but William didn't care about that. Much less did he care about his tiredness. After all, he had achieved it. He had finally obtained the most important characteristic in this world. Magic. He didn't want to say that he was a full-fledged magician, but he was already one step closer. He was at the starting line, just like all the characters of the original work, not to mention that he was in the same era as the Golden Trio and all the important events. William had no interest in fighting against Voldemort and his vassals, but rather wanted to know the world. After living in the normal world for practically 2 decades, he was now in a fantasy world. He wanted to discover and know everything. William was excited, and how could he not be? He was on the first step of the ladder of dreams. The eyes betrayed William's happiness and finally closed, showing that the young wizard lost consciousness, flooded by the dream of his future. Time followed its flow and finally morning came. William's body and mind had returned to the optimal state. The first thing the boy did was to check the magic inside him, and for that he did a basic exercise according to his mind. First he extended the mind's eye area and pointed to a glass on the desk. Using the magic inside him, levitated it slightly. It was not a high-level spell, but it was necessary for him to convince himself that he now had magic and everything that had happened before was not a dream. It was at that moment that the house elf Verona appeared in the room with a frightened expression. She was trembling and looked at William slightly. "Verona!" William cried at the sight of the house elf. "Young master, I bring bad news, terrible news." Verona tried not to let her experiments leak out, she really tried not to let her actions attract attention. But, asked William with a bit of fear. "Lord Rosier wants to see you, young master, he wants you to come to his chambers," he told Verona. "Young master!" Verona speaks in a low voice and covered her fearful face as she backed away in small steps. William saw Verona act and sighed, looking up at the ceiling, mentally preparing himself to see the owner of the castle and his own grandfather. It would be the first time he saw him since he reincarnated, but something told him it had to do with his awakening in magic, which would be bad news. Without saying anything to Verona, he headed towards Lord Rosier's office. It was not difficult to reach the place, and when he opened the door there was the old man in his seat. Of course, even when William called him old man because of the difference in generations, his appearance was not at all that of an old man. Lord Rosier was at most 60 years old, but his exterior was like someone in his 40s. William paused at the door for a moment when he heard the voice from inside, "Come in." The door opened slowly, revealing the figure of the boy, and on the other side Lord Rosier looking at his papers. "Grandfather, you don't need to say anything, you wouldn't understand anyway." Lord Rosier held up a letter from among his papers. "It seems I was wrong about your fate. If Hogwarts wrote you a letter, it means they sensed your magic, and that would explain your actions these days." Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Dear Mr. Rosier, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please note the list of required equipment and books. Classes start on September 1st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Uniform: first-year students will need -3 plain working robes, a pointed black hat for everyday wear, a pair of protective gloves, a winter coat. Books: all students must have a copy of the following books: the Miranda Goshawk Statutory Book of Spells, A History of Magic, Bathilda Bagshot, Magical Theory, Adalbert Waffling, A Beginner's Guide to Transformations, Emmerich Switch, A Thousand Magical Herbs and Mushrooms, Phil Littaspore, Magical Filters and Potions, Arsenius Jigger, Fantastic Animals and Where to Find Them, Newt Scamander, The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, Quentin Trimble, Basic Elements, A Wand, A Cauldron, A Telescope, A Brass Scale. Students may also bring an owl, cat, rat, or toad. Parents are reminded that first-year students are not allowed to have their own brooms. A magic school? Asked William, surprised without taking his eyes off the letter. Surprised? Asked Lord Rosier, looking at his grandson. I was too. After all, squibs can't enter Hogwarts, but I sense magic all around you. I don't need explanations, this is the best possible outcome. The Rosier family has a great legacy and it cannot be interrupted. Everyone in the main branch must be worthy of the family name. I understand. William couldn't say much, but he was really surprised by the letter, his magic and his grandfather's attitude, which didn't seem to be that bad or good. Maybe he was also glad because he wasn't a squib. William couldn't know everything. I would like to teach you everything you need before you enter Hogwarts, but time is not enough. You can choose books from the library and you should prepare as best as you can before you leave. Tomorrow we will go and get everything you need to start your schooling. You can go. Lord Rosier waved his hand for William to leave him alone, and he himself silently disappeared. Once outside he couldn't help but make a victory pose. Chapter 5, Chapter 05, The Feeling of Realism. William did not return to his room but went straight to the family library. He had been there before to look for the method of awakening magic, but now there was a different motive. Now he aimed to learn how to be a wizard. The family library was immense. William knew this all too well. After all, he got lost a few times inside. With a family so many years old, he couldn't wait to find what he needed. Compendium of Basic Curses and How to Combat Them. The Heir of Slytherin. Protecting Your Mind Charm. a practical guide to countering legerdemacy. Defensive and deterrent enchantments. Extreme enchantments. Enchantments and ancient spells fallen into oblivion. Stimulating enchantments. Confronting the undefinable. Famous fire eater. The secrets of the darkest arts. Among other herbology and magi-zoology-oriented books, he basically took everything he could and piled it up in his room with Verona's help. If he had the opportunity to take books from the library, then he had to do it now. In the future the opportunity may not show itself again. By the next morning William was out of bed first thing. From Verona's words he knew that his grandfather was a temperamental person and didn't like crowds, so he preferred to shop first thing when most of the wizards were not yet ready to show up in the alley. "I'm here," said William, happily walking down the stairs as he adjusted his suit. Lord Rosier was waiting for William in the main hall, where they were both dressed elegantly. Lord Rosier's robes clearly demonstrated his political value as a great aristocrat. To get all the way to Diagon Alley use the apparition, there was no way they were going to use the visitor's door, let alone the flue powder. Lord Rosier was reluctant to soil his suit. "Hold on tight, William, I'd hate to have to restore any part of your body," said Lord Rosier with a chilling smile, making William feel mild discomfort. The moment the apparition started, William could feel a strong pressure all over his body, as if he was being crushed from all angles, or else as if he was going through a very narrow tunnel at a great speed. He could even feel as if his lungs were running out of air, and when he noticed it again, the air came back as well as the feeling of freedom. "Are you complete?" asked Lord Rosier, looking at William from all sides. "I was expecting to have to restore a hand or a leg." Pitiful, he took steps forward without looking back. William couldn't say anything. He was still recovering from his first interaction with the apparition. In the books they described it, but in the movie it just seemed to be a feeling of disorientation. Clearly things are different in reality. "Well, here I go," William said, looking around in awe. He was finally in the real Diagon Alley. He was on the doorstep of his life as a wizard. William walked quickly to catch up with his grandfather and not get left behind. "Where do we start?" asked the boy curiously. "Shall we begin?" Lord Rosier looked at his grandson with a cold expression. "No, no, no, no. You have to look for your school supplies. I have business to attend to. Think of this as an adventure. You will have many at Hogwarts after all," laughed the old man coldly to take out a small bag and deliver it in William's hands. "Don't buy anything used. I don't want my family to look like the ridiculous Weasleys, do you understand?" William just nodded his head. He knew what he had to do. It was a priority not to make his grandfather angry, and on the other hand he understood the discrimination to the family of redheads. Practically all pure-blood wizards belonging to the Holy 28, wizards hated purebloods, hate Muggle, and therefore hate mixed bloods. A ridiculousness, but it is something that exists and William could not change it. He would not try either. Lord Rosier said goodbye to William and walked down one of the many alleyways bordering the Great Diagon Alley. William could follow him, but it was better not to get involved in family problems. Meeting other mortifagi would be like playing with fire. The first address was Madame Malkin's store. Robes for all occasions. It wasn't hard to get what he needed. After all, his measurements were nothing special. Fate led William to buy the different items needed, and finally he stopped at Flourish and Blots for his school texts. Obviously he bought more than he needed, but it was for a good cause. He had to hide most of the books he took out of the family library for obvious reasons. If Lord Rosier found out that he took out so many books on dark magic, then he would be in a lot of trouble. When Will left Flourish and Blots, it had been a long time. Diagon Alley was crowded with people, making him only sigh tired. Now he had to pass between people with all the things. Of course many others like books were ordered with owl dispatch. Finally Will stopped at his last goal, and of course the most important of all, Ollivander's wand store. He couldn't buy a wand anywhere else even if they asked him to. This store is famous among the followers of the saga, and now he had the opportunity to enter. How many people would wish to have that opportunity? Chapter 6, Chapter 06, The Wand of the Child Who Survived. As he entered the store he noticed that it was quite different from what appeared in the movies and was more similar to the books. Of course the store was small, empty, and there was only a thin chair in a corner. Everything was full of dust and small boxes stacked one on top of the other everywhere, reaching even up to the ceiling itself. There was no one around, and it didn't look like there would be anyone in a good while. William walked a few steps to the front. "Hello?" asked William with a soft tone of voice, expecting some answer, and so it was. From one of the corners of the room among all the boxes appeared the head of an old man. He looked carefully at the boy, a young man of the Rosier family. By his age and his features I guess he must be the son of Mr. Evan Rosier, am I wrong? The tone of the old man was not entirely friendly, but neither was he apathetic, he just seemed careful. William had in mind what would happen and therefore did not pay attention to him. It had happened before in the other stores. It was enough to say his last name for the owners to treat him with a little more delicacy and at the same time more coldly. "I've come for my wand, Mr. Ollivander," William said politely, trying not to offend the person. He didn't want his already poor reputation to become more invisible, so to speak. "Very well, hold on a second. Let's see what I have for you." Ollivander's mouth changed slightly and he soon went to the wands on his shelves until when he returned with a box in his hands. Rowan wood, dragon heart fiber core, 13 inches, and very flexible. "Your father and grandfather had ones like that. Basically the whole Rosier family uses rowan wood. I know that will be your case." Before he could say anything else, another person entered the store. A small boy wearing old clothes and much larger than appropriate, with a plaid shirt several sizes too big. "Hello?" asked the boy shyly, looking at both William and Ollivander strangely. William could immediately recognize the person. After all, he was the protagonist of the story, or well, the protagonist of the original story at least. Ollivander's eyes on the other hand seemed to sparkle at the sight of the boy. "I knew I would see you someday, Mr. Potter." His voice was totally contradictory to the one that was used with William, but the latter didn't mind. He wasn't expecting special treatment either, but seeing Harry Potter in Ollivander's store was really a surprise and a total coincidence. "Mr. Potter, you don't need to wait long. I just have to finish with Mr. Rosier's choice first." "Don't worry, I also want to see which wand picks the boy who survived." William crossed his arms and leaned against one of the nearby shelves. He definitely wouldn't miss that moment for anything in the world. "Is my presence a bother, Mr. Potter?" At William's question, Harry couldn't help but shake his head. He didn't fully understand and he was inexperienced in the wizarding world, so he didn't know what to do. "Fine," said Ollivander, putting away the wand he would hand to William in the box. "If there are no problems, then I will get the wand for Mr. Potter." The old man ran down the corridors and looked for a wand at one end, picking up a small box. "This one is a bit special, very similar to the one used by his father." He handed the wand to the nervous Harry and said, "Wave it to use it." Just like in the original story, it took just a wave of his hands for magic to come out of the wand and all the boxes on a shelf flew out, surprising the fearful Harry, who ended up leaving the wand in the box again. "I see that was a bad choice," muttered Ollivander, frowning slightly to run off again. "Grab the ladder and pull a wand from the top. We'd better try something I know from the motherly side. I mean, you have the same eyes as your mother." Harry put his fingers near his eyes and then took the wand. As he waved it, a vase exploded, causing fear in the boy and a small chuckle in William, who was already waiting for the results. "Well, I think we should try another possibility. This one is rare but likely," Ollivander said, to walk down one of the small corridors and take a box from a shelf full of dust. The wand seemed forgotten and Ollivander muttered to himself a few words before handing it to Harry. "Mr. Potter, please." As he took the wand, the aura around Harry changed. The light around him seemed brighter and there was even a slight current of heat. "Curious, very curious," muttered Ollivander. "It is curious that you can use this wand, Mr. Potter, as this wand has a sister. The phoenix from which the feather to make this wand came from had 2 feathers, therefore 2 wands were made, and the sister wand to this one was the one that gave you that scar on your forehead." "Don't let it scare you, Harry," William interrupted the dialogue as he saw the expression on Harry's face. It was not among William's tastes to see adults scaring children, even more so when this one knows nothing of his past. "What he says is true, but I think you should hear it from someone else, someone you trust. You can ask the half-giant at the window." As Harry turned around, Harry could see Hagrid smiling as he held a cage with a white owl. "Happy birthday, Harry." Harry was certainly happy to see the owl and quickly left the store, forgetting to pay for the wand. William looked at Ollivander again and said, "I'll pay for the wand. Now we can get on with my problem. We have no spectators and this will be a little more interesting than usual." Ollivander smiled with an expression full of boredom. "I didn't expect Mr. Rosier to help his master's enemy. I'm only 11, no one is my master. Just because my father is the lapdog of a dark wizard like Voldemort doesn't mean I am too. Chapter 7, Chapter 07, The Wand of Choice. I suppose it would be best to try the wand I selected earlier for you, don't you think, Mr. Rosier? Ollivander had the wand in his hands ready to be delivered into William's hands, but before William could hold it another wand flew out and prevented the event. Ollivander's eyes opened wide. It was obvious that he was surprised. He had never expected this to happen before. It had never happened before. A wand took the initiative to look for its owner. It was as if it had a soul. Apparently we have a very excited wand, said Ollivander, taking the wand in his hands. Olive wood, unicorn hair core, 10 inches, and somewhat stiff. I guess this is the one, Mr. Rosier. Ollivander got ready to hand it over, but another out of prognosis event occurred. The shelves began to shake. What's wrong? The shelves are shaking, asked William, but Mr. Ollivander put his finger to William's lips, causing William to shut up. It's not the shelves, it's the wands. The wands? Asked William, causing Ollivander to nod his head. You have an uncanny talent, boy. I've never seen this before. Truth be told, in all of Ollivander's history there has never been a similar record. You seem to like all wands, Mr. Rosier. What? Asked William with an expression full of displeasure. How do I know which is my ideal wand? Mr. Ollivander only raised his shoulders, indicating that he had no idea what to do next. Having seen the wand's previous reaction, he knew this could be dangerous. I mean, with so many wands around, he might end up getting killed before he even entered Hogwarts. William's brain began to process what had happened and could not find a logical answer. I mean, magic is not logical, but neither is being attacked by jealous wands. William raised his arms as if he was at war and uttered words out loud. I think it would be best if I selected a wand myself. I mean, I know all the wands present are excited to come with me, but I can't take them all. I don't have enough hands to use them all. That's not to mention there are many wizards who would love to have them. All sound stopped immediately. The wands had gone quiet again, but now William had to keep his word and choose a companion. He could not ask the elder Ollivander for advice, as it would be the same as denigrating one wand from another, and that could start a massacre where there was only one target. Knowing that his life was in danger, it was inevitable that he would put all the effort into his choice. William went around the wand store and looked in every corner, or at least tried to. Have you made your choice yet, Mr. Rosier? Asked Ollivander from the side. Something like that, William answered vaguely as he clenched his fists one last time and activated his mind's eye again. William's range of vision extended throughout the tent. He could now see a few more meters. Having awakened the magic within him influenced the mind's eye, developing a spontaneous growth of abilities, almost like an evolution. Now, with all the details in his mind, William could see each wand inside each of the boxes. They all had a light blue glow surrounding them. Wand indicated, William muttered as a command to his mind's eye, and it itself stopped pointing to all the wands. Instead it glowed one in particular, a wand wrapped in just a cloth at the end of a shelf in a place that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. William walked briskly to the spot and pulled the cloth delicately, causing great surprise in Ollivander. That's... With his hands William removed the cloth, revealing a black-colored wand without a specific handle and only with a small gem in the center forming an arrow where the tip of the wand was supposed to be. I guess this is the one. William had a slight smile on his face, waving the wand lightly to awaken the magic and check for compatibility. The silence inside Ollivander's wand store suddenly disappeared, suddenly being replaced by the sound of the forest, the chirping of birds, the fluttering of leaves spread to Ollivander's ears. Even the scents of the forest reached his nostrils. Looks like this wand finally accepted its owner, said Ollivander proudly, looking at William wrapped in that light. Finally? Asked Will, puzzled. Sure, it was forgotten, but this one himself expected it to be a couple of years, at most a decade, but it was only a vague guess after all. This wand, Mr. Rosier, has been sitting on the shelves for 3 centuries. 3 centuries? Exclaimed William in surprise, but Ollivander just nodded his head. This wand was designed by my grandfather and great-grandfather as a project to create a wand to rival the legendary Elder Wand. Unfortunately, it was a resounding failure, or so it was known until now. A wand capable of rivaling the Elder Wand, William murmured, looking at the wand in his hands. It would be amazing if it were real. Those were exactly my great-grandfather's words. Ollivander chuckled. There was no way of knowing how powerful the wand was, as it never chose an owner, and I can guess the reason for this. William took a seat and looked at Ollivander. The wand you hold in your hands is unique in that it possesses not one but two cores within it, and furthermore one of those cores is not a normal one. The wand is made with elderwood for reference, is 12 inches long and is incredibly rigid. The cores inside the wand correspond to two different species. The first core is a thunderbird tail feather, a rare species that can predict dangers around the owner of the wand and can even cast preemptive spells in case of a major danger. The second core belongs to a fairy. A fairy? Asked William, mildly surprised. Fairies certainly weren't used for wands, but it's not like they were special either. They were simply popular with muggles, but in the magical community they were at most strange but nothing more. The wand does not possess the essence of a fairy but the very heart of one. This may not make it powerful, but it allows the wizard to bring out more of himself. Ollivander was saying this with complete confidence in the wand. This is a special wand. I hope you can appreciate it properly. William looked at the wand in his hand with satisfaction and pride. Don't worry, Mr. Ollivander, I will take care of it properly. Chapter 8, Chapter 08, Marcus Rosier. William walked down Diagon Alley with his wand in his waist. He now had his own companion or weapon. There wasn't much to do, but Will still had a good amount of money in his bag, and he would be an idiot to give it away to his grandfather. The old man had a lot of money in the castle and was reluctant to give any away, that included his own grandchildren. The stores in Diagon Alley, all were visited by the Rosier heir. He bought every single thing that caught his eye, among some that were not worth the money like quills or flasks, and the last destination of his visit was a lottery and betting house. William entered the small space where there were several greedy goblins everywhere. William was not used to seeing these creatures, but he knew they were bad-tempered, so he decided to appear to act normal. He did not want to contribute a grain of sand for a new possible rebellion of the goblins. I want to buy some lottery tickets, Will said with a slight smile on his face in front of the counter where there was a goblin with a book and a long pen in his hand. Tickets? Sure, just have to pay in advance. The goblin held up a finger, looking at William with a smile. William opened the pouch in his pocket and pulled out a gold galleon on the counter. I want the most expensive tickets. The goblin returned a tenebrous smile, pulling out a box where there were several tickets sorted. You can select now. Looking at the tickets, William knew immediately what this was all about. The tickets were made in different ways from each other and all had different contents, most similar to the scratch and win tickets in William's previous life. They certainly weren't popular with muggles yet, so William could intuit that they were invented in the magical world. Scratch and win tickets were not very popular because they were really fixed. The chances of winning were certainly low, and these should be no different. William activated his mind's eye and put in his brain the winning ticket. Those special tickets glowed a different color in front of William's eyes, and these were the same ones he bought, leaving the corresponding golden galleons in the display. Of course, he also bought some that had nothing special, and this was to cover his move. Goblins are greedy, and if they find out that William cheated, he could end up in severe trouble. The shopping was over. It was time to return home to the Rosier family castle, but the problem now was how to get back. William was stranded in Diagon Alley until his grandfather showed up, a pitiful truth. As he resumed walking and browsing the stores in search of something that caught his eye, he recognized a familiar silhouette, a young man with white hair and light blue eyes staring at him from afar. Marcus, William murmured. William's older brother walked calmly, keeping his hands inside his pockets. He had several chains on his clothes that rattled with each of his steps. The closer Marcus was to William, the latter could feel more pressure on his body. Books? Asked Marcus, picking one up from William's shopping cart. Fantastic Animals by Newt Scamander. It's a very useful title actually. Of course there are many other books you can buy if you want to learn how to assassinate beasts. I remember there is a title that teaches the most useful spells to eliminate each species. I'm not looking to slay any beasts, said William, taking the book out of his brother's hands and returning it to the cart. It's obvious, William. Marcus slipped his hands back into his pockets. So it's true what the portraits at home said, you were able to awaken the magic within you and get into Hogwarts. It really was a surprise. It was just something that had to happen. It's only natural, William said as if it was nothing, keeping his composure in the face of the pressure exerted by Marcus. Mother was surprised. as were all our brothers. We were wrong about a squib status. From now on you can learn the family arts." Marcus sketched a sinister smile as his light blue eyes glowed partially. In William's mind his brother was no different than a vicious beast seeking to control everything. "I don't want you to be a disappointment when you enter Hogwarts. According to my sources, the boy who survived will be attending this year. He was seen here in the alley a few hours ago. Father would be happy to know that you and he will be in the same generation. Don't you think so too, William?" Marcus' voice was like the whisper of the demons in the horror movies William saw in his first life. It was obvious that his kinsman was a full-fledged representative of the hallowed 28, as well as a fervent follower of the blood, just as Evan Rosiera was before Marcus. Marcus's hand came to rest on William's hair. "You are different, little brother. You no longer freeze when you look at me and don't recoil when I advance. I'm surprised you can stand the sound of my chains. I guess the magic in your body now gives you a little more courage." William could feel his heart racing as he heard those words, and that had substance to it. It hadn't been long since he was in this new body, but most of the previous memories prevailed. The fact that Marcus always bullied little William was hard to forget, and William's own body remembered the fear. Just as William's body was about to take a step backwards away from Marcus, a hand came to rest on the little white-haired boy's shoulder. "Marcus!" Looking back, William saw his grandfather, Lord Rosier, standing looking down at the eldest Rosier of the new generation. "Grandfather," Marcus greeted, bowing slightly in front of Lord Rosier. "I didn't expect to see you in this place, but I think I surmise the reason for your trip." "I don't care about your conclusions, Marcus. You should be in the castle right now. The alley is not your work office." "Is grandfather insinuating that I followed them to this place?" "You can think what you want anyway. This place at the moment is not your destination. You are dismissed." Marcus looked at Lord Rosier for a moment and then let out a smile as Lord Rosier commands, "See you at home, William." Marcus withdrew into the crowd and disappeared. Lord Rosier didn't give William a single glance. "We must leave as well." Chapter 9, Chapter 09, Farewell My Old Life. Finally the time inside the Rosier Castle was over for William, and it was time for his entrance to Hogwarts. A month of waiting was not short, but compared to the fanatics who never had the chance, then this was nothing. There wasn't much to say. He said goodbye to Verona and asked her to look after his room while he was gone. He arranged the trunks and suitcases ready to leave when he noticed his grandfather waiting for him. "It's time for you to take the express to Hogwarts. Hold on to my arm and remember to keep all your limbs close. This time I can't regenerate you in the middle of all the people." Again they used apparition. William wasn't very comfortable using that method of travel, but having experienced it the first time now, it didn't seem to be as uncomfortable as before. Of course that didn't mean it was comfortable. "Here we are." Lord Rosier's muffled voice was nothing out of the ordinary. Instead, the train in front of William was what was special. There were many people in the station, which made the elder Rosier uncomfortable, but William had no intention of worrying about the old man and just walked to the front with his belongings on the carriage. "Platform 9 3/4, muttered William, surprised and excited. His brain was full of illusions about his school life and all the spells he would learn. Right now he was the most similar to a kid with a new video game, impatient to get in, but before he could, he was pulled from the collar of his robes with Lord Rosier's cane. "Wait," said the old man, stopping William. "I still have many things to say that I did not tell you before at the manor, as they were not important due to your condition, but you must know them before you get on the express. Hogwarts has 4 houses that you should already know. Our family has always been a resident of Slytherin House. That includes your cousin Felix Rosier. You will get into Slytherin as expected, but in case it is another house there won't be much of a problem. You are a Rosier after all. I'm just warning you to stay out of trouble, as you know we are not popular among wizards." Lord Rosier put his old hands on William's shoulders and stared at him. "And never make friends with the dirty bloods. Don't let our family's value decline because of you." William was not an idiot. He understood very well the pure-blood families and knew about their absurd rules. He did not expect to break them. After all, it was fate that he was in Slytherin. There were no dirty bloods there. Now he just had to avoid being in trouble. That was not a problem either. He just had to be away from Harry Potter and his friends. William moved away from his grandfather. He didn't want to be near the old man and his traditionalist customs. He didn't really care about the customs. Now that he was in a world full of magic, the only thing he cared about was the magic itself. Once inside the express, it was easy to settle into an empty compartment. He had arrived earlier than usual, so there weren't many students inside the train yet. Knowing that he would not be near the problems, he took out a book to read. He had not practiced enough due to his problem with magic, but he knew that he had to concentrate his efforts in Severus Snape's potions class. Being a Slytherin, he would have some protection, but William wanted the sympathy of this professor, and the way to win it would be to be number one in his class, being one of his group of students. Even if Hermione Granger was ready, she didn't have a chance to win Snape's sympathy just because she was from Gryffindor House. "I'd love to have a pair of headphones," William muttered, remembering his former life and his habit of studying while listening to music. That memory of his past life was now very distant, but somehow it was also precious. Unfortunately, headphones had not yet been invented, and Hogwarts was not allowed to have Muggle technological products. The door out of nowhere opened, revealing the figure of that young man William had seen in Ollivander's wand store, the legendary Harry Potter. "Hello," greeted Harry nervously, but he managed to recognize the young man leaning lengthwise on the seat. He himself knew he was the wand store watcher. "Can I sit here?" asked the boy, and William didn't pay much attention to him. He simply took his hand out of the book. "The seats are not my property, use it as you like," said William with a bored tone, without taking his attention off the book. As an experienced student, he knew how to achieve proper concentration. Harry was silent for quite a while. He didn't say anything, hoping not to disturb William. He himself managed to feel slightly bad seeing William's casual clothes, much more elegant than usual. Even his Uncle Vernon and his cousin Dudley Dursley didn't have the chance to wear clothes this elegant. Soon the express was underway, the whistle blew and the station was left behind. William was still immersed in his book. He knew there was someone in the compartment, but hadn't realized the identity of the other person. He hoped it was just an extra, since he chose the opposite side than the one in the movie. The door finally opened again, and now there was another of the original protagonists of the saga, this time another member of the hallowed 28, sixth son of the Weasley couple, Ronald Weasley. "Do you mind?" asked the red-haired man uncomfortably. "All the other compartments are full." Harry looked towards William, but William simply didn't seem to mind, so Ron calmly walked in and sat down next to Harry. "I'm Ron Weasley. Nice to meet you." He extended his hand towards Harry, who responded with a smile at the redhead. "I'm Harry Potter," he returned the handshake, surprising both the redhead and William, who was in his book and simply sat back in the seat cursing his luck in his mind. "By Merlin's beard, it's you," Ron mentioned in surprise. "Are you really that Harry Potter, the one with that? You know?" Ron pointed to his own forehead, the mark. Harry replied, lifting his hair to show the mark made during his time as a baby. William also saw the scar, but instead could only yawn due to sleep. "What's your name?" asked Harry, looking at William. Ron finally turned his attention to the person in front of him and could only make a terrified expression. Will's appearance was basically the same appearance as his father. "William Rosier, a pleasure." The boy introduced himself with a slight smile full of boredom. He didn't want to add any flattering comments towards Harry, as this himself wasn't 100% special, and doing so only generates annoyance in Ron. What he needed the least right now was trouble. "You're that Rosier, aren't you?" asked Ron. "That one," he returned the question, looking at the sixth Weasley. "You know, the heir to the family, the one who is said to have no magic. My dad told me about it," Ron mentioned. William couldn't help but laugh silently. Having a squib as an heir was simply a slap in the face for such an arrogant family as the Rosiers are. William could imagine the embarrassment his grandfather felt, but he must have also been happy when he found out about the awakening of magic inside William. Now it made sense why he let him get the book he wanted. "Yes, I am that Rosier, and as you can see, I have magic. Just in the time it was needed." William opened the book in his hands. "Now as you can see, I have to study to catch up on the course. I don't want to be the laughing stock of everyone for not knowing anything, being somewhat famous, but of course not as famous as Mr. Potter." Harry stared at Will and seemed to realize his mistake. He didn't know anything about magic either, and he was just there wasting time. Of course he didn't have much to do since his books were in the cargo compartment. "You don't have to worry, Harry. We're first years. Classes start by teaching the basics. it's not like we have an entrance exam, Ron said happily as he patted his new friend on the shoulder. Will could only sigh in response. Apparently Harry Potter wouldn't be spared humiliation from Snape. Chapter 10, You have the skills for everything. The conversation between the boys continued even when William went back to his book. That's when the Honeydukes Express stopped at the compartment door to offer the sweets it was carrying in its little cart. Obviously Harry Potter bought the whole cart with his coins. He offered some candy to his compartment mates and Will selected one that looked normal with a flavor that wasn't special. He didn't want something like booger flavor. Knowing what would happen and who would appear now, he could only sigh. As expected, the door opened again and revealed the figure of a girl. William was slightly surprised that she was different from the movie, more because of her teeth, but it wasn't something that was out of his calculations, plus it was a little encouraging that she was like that. "Have you seen a frog?" asked the girl, looking at the trio in the compartment. Ron was playing with his wand trying to conjure his rat to make it change color, but nothing happened, making the girl laugh. "Are you sure that's a real spell?" At the girl's question, Ron and Harry looked at each other uncomfortably. "I've only tried simple spells, but they worked well." She took steps forward looking for where to sit but could only find Will leaning back in the seat while reading. "Sorry, would you mind?" At the girl's question, Ron looked at her fearfully, but Will only sighed and regained a normal sitting posture. Without closing the book completely, the girl didn't lose her concentration. She sat back in her seat and pointed her wand at Harry. "Oculus reparo!" exclaimed the girl, unleashing her spell to repair Harry's glasses. She immediately recognized Harry and duly introduced herself with her name, Hermione Granger. Everyone introduced themselves except William, who was immersed in his book, but no one seemed to mind. After all this, one himself was silent the whole way. "You have to change now, we'll be arriving at the station soon," the girl warned before getting up to leave. "The frog is 2 compartments away, under the right seat. It's hiding in a corner." Will continued reading, surprising the trio he was sitting with. "You better go get it, otherwise you'll lose it." Hermione wanted to say something but decided to follow William's suggestion and ran to get the frog. As for William himself, he only said it because he felt sorry for Neville and everything that happened to him throughout the story. He himself didn't deserve so much trouble when he suffered so much throughout his life. A little empathy. When they arrived at the station, all the children descended and were guided by Hagrid to the rafts. William was surprised. Never in all his previous life had he seen a scene like the one he was witnessing, the great castle of Hogwarts. Truth be told, in his previous life he had not had opportunities to travel, and so he did not have many memories of different places, but now it was different. They were led through the castle and partially introduced, and finally they were all ushered into the dining room. William could see the small altercation between Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Draco Malfoy, but not an issue he had to get involved in. Getting involved with any of the three was just trouble. Led by Professor McGonagall, everyone entered the dining hall where the long tables were waiting with many students at each table, enchanted sky looking like it was night and many candles levitating. The students were stopped right in front of the teachers to give the floor to the headmaster of the school, Albus Dumbledore, the strongest wizard alive today. Finally came the turn of the sorting hat. Each of the students had to be referred to one of the 4 houses: Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, or Ravenclaw. The students passed one by one without change to the original houses. Harry Potter was the center of attention for everyone, and finally it was Gryffindor, the house that took him in. "William Rosier," called Professor McGonagall, looking at her long parchment. Will took steps forward to get to the stool where he sat down to receive the hat on his head. The moment the hat came in contact with Will's head, he began to shout "Slythe." He didn't finish the word. He half stood and fell silent, surprising everyone, including Dumbledore himself, who stroked his beard. "What happened?" asked William, looking up. "You're not simple, kid. I've never had a head like this before, I must admit. This is a really hard choice. You don't seem to like any of the houses specifically, but your abilities are really amazing," the hat praised William loudly. "Your blood is pure and proud, worthy of a Slytherin like your whole family. There is nothing to be ashamed of. Slytherin students are calculating like you. Of course, that is not to say that your quest for knowledge is not worthy of Ravenclaw. The libraries of that house will help you in your progress, but Hufflepuff could also be your home. No one has tried as hard as you in the past. A squib becoming a wizard is nothing that has been seen before." With the last words even Argus Filch dropped his goblet due to surprise. Some professors gave him a look but understood his surprise. After all, he was a squib himself. The hat was still on Will's head. 5 minutes had already passed. "What else can I see about you?" asked the hat, almost laughing like a kid in a store full of sweets. "Oh, you certainly are a very special boy, Mr. Rosier. There is no doubt your house is Gryffindor." There was some applause, but in general the whole place was silent, and William himself had a pale complexion as the hat laughed. "This time I'm 100% sure." "Great, now the children of Death Eaters can get into Gryffindor," said Ron with annoyance, watching as William walked past to the table away from his own position. "Now we won't be able to be safe even in the common room." "What do you mean, Ron? Who is a Death Eater?" asked Harry, looking at his new friend, but the one who answered was the girl who had repaired his glasses earlier. "Ron, he means followers of you-know-who. The Rosier family were one of the Dark Lord's supporters, and from what I hear the former head of the house was killed by Aurors." "They are dark wizards, Harry." "Dark wizards?" muttered Harry, looking at William in the distance. Chapter 11, My New Study House. William stood at the big table crestfallen for quite some time, thinking about what his future would be like from now on and wondering how bad his luck was to get to that point. Even the Sorting Hat boycotted his plan for success. Now not only would he be under the reproachful gaze of his grandfather and siblings when he returned home, but also the Slytherin students, who happened at that moment to be looking at him from across the room with contempt, would denigrate him throughout his schooling. Not to forget the Gryffindors themselves. While their motto says they are brave and very honorable, that doesn't mean they are friendly to the son of a Death Eater. Basically, he was a snake in lion territory. All of the above could be verified by looking at William right now. No one said anything to him, the students avoided looking at him, and those around him moved a few inches as if he was some kind of pest. The truth, William didn't understand why the hat had made that choice. Every time he thought about it, he came to the same conclusion: the death he had in his previous life. It was certainly a brave thing to do, but the words that should be used would be those of insanity. After all, he lost his life in his stupid heroic act. Sigh. Sighed William, scratching his head full of annoyance. He stopped rambling in his mind and chose to eat something so he wouldn't suffer through the night. Then he could deal with all the problems that would come. Worst case scenario, he will just have to go alone everywhere. It's not like in his previous life he had many friends either. It wouldn't be any different in this world. On the other hand, he had to remember to be away from Harry Potter and his friends. When dinner was over, everyone was organized by their respective prefects to enter their houses. In the case of William, Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione, they were all directed by Percy Weasley. "During the morning you will have a class, then you can go to lunch. Remember to get to your classes on time. The professors are not as friendly as they look, specifically Potions Professor Severus Snape. I recommend not to make him angry." They passed by the stairs that changed direction as they were reminded by Percy how often these stairs changed time. William put his attention on the amount of pictures all over the place and how these were moving. "It's like they're alive," muttered Will, looking at a portrait of several people on a car as these same people welcomed him to the school. Arriving in the hallway was the ghost that was omitted from the movie versions, Peeves the mischievous ghost. William was prepared for the moment due to the fact that he had his mind's eye active and could sense him even when this one was invisible. Most of the freshmen were hit by the canes with the exception of William. Percy threatened the ghost, saying that he would bring the bloodthirsty Baron. Angry Peeves decides to retreat, but not before throwing all the canes at Neville, but thanks to William's quick reaction the boy was able to avoid the blow. Thank you," Neville said fearfully, looking at the canes where he was before. "It's nothing." William hid his hands again under his cloak. Percy had to apologize for Peeves' action and advised all the students to avoid the ghost as much as possible, but on no account to make him angry, otherwise they might suffer quite a lot. Once they finished their walk, they were in front of the painting of the fat lady. William had to get closer to hear the password, otherwise he didn't know if he would be able to enter the common room in the future. According to his deduction, it was almost impossible for another Gryffindor student to give it to him. Behind the painting of the fat lady was the common room, filled with large cupboards, tables, and a large blackboard where students could find news, announcements, loss notices, among other things. A large window overlooked the outside grounds of the castle, and a large fireplace was attached to one wall. In conclusion, the Gryffindor Common Room is a very comforting place where students gather to study, celebrate, or just relax. Percy gathered all the students in the center of the common room. All right everyone, this is the common room. The dormitories are on the second floor. The boys will sleep on the left side and the girls on the right side. When you are upstairs you will notice that all your belongings are in the trunks at the foot of your beds. Having finished the first tour, everyone dispersed to their rooms. William was one of the first to go upstairs and was quickly able to find the location of his bed. It was far from the stairs, practically at the end of the hall. Seeing its location, William even thought that this was Dumbledore's work, but he quickly put those stupid thoughts out of his head. It would be stupid to think that such a great wizard would worry about an insignificant first year, an extra in Harry Potter's life. The best thing to do was to choose to go to bed to rest. Chapter 12, The First Classes. First day of classes, William woke up early in the morning, started his day with a refreshing shower to awaken all his senses, organized his clothes and arranged all his materials to start his journey to the transformation room. With a small pocket watch there wasn't much of a problem sticking to schedules. Waking up early was common in William's life, even in 2 lifetimes. When William arrived at the dining hall for breakfast there were only 2 people among the teachers. Not that he wanted to draw attention to himself, but it was simply that the rest of the students were not in William's habit. Headmaster Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall were those who were in the dining hall before the rest. "Mr. Rosier, you are the first to arrive," greeted Professor McGonagall to the young man who sat at the far end of the professors at the large Gryffindor table. "Good morning, Professor McGonagall." "Good morning, Headmaster." Dumbledore nodded as he lifted a piece of toast to his mouth. After he sat down, Hermione Granger arrived and then all the rest of the students. The room was practically full after a while, students from all 4 houses everywhere, and the sound filled the place, but William was still silent. No one wanted to have contact with him. William was at the end of the table with a book and an apple. He wasn't picky about the food, but he certainly would have preferred something with more fat and frying, something like bacon, but he didn't have the freedom to choose. Finally the first bell rang announcing the start of classes. The first class was with Professor McGonagall, being the same one on transformation studies. William didn't bother with any of this class and just wrote down everything about the class. The second class was a bit more complex. The potions class with Professor Severus Snape was as dark as William remembered from the movies, and that is because Snape's greasy hair was nothing like the movie version, not to mention the jagged teeth. Potions class was based on teasing the Gryffindor house students. In this class William was close to Neville to avoid the accident of the boys' boils. After 2 long classes it was finally time for lunch. Lunch was pretty much the same as during breakfast, except that many were doing their homework. William was going over his notes and eating something simple. No one presented a single word to William, and there was no longer any need to explain the reason. There was no specific mail for William, and William himself did not want anything to arrive in his name. If he had anyone to send him mail it would be his grandfather, and knowing he was in Gryffindor where he was not supposed to be, then the letter would not be to congratulate him. At the end of the lunch hour the broom handling class continued, a class that William wanted to attend very much. It was anyone's dream to fly freely in the sky. Flying in a plane made it possible in the 21st century, but there was no freedom, and flying on a broom would be what William needed. As in the original story, Neville shot off on his broom uncontrollably, and the teacher proved her uselessness by not stopping him, or rather allowing the young student to hurt himself. William didn't want to make a move and just watched the fall. It was unfortunate, but he didn't want to be punished for saving others. The teacher walked out with Neville from the flying yard, leaving everyone with the order to stay on the ground. William left his broom on the side and walked away from the group. He had already seen the movies and read several stories to know that this would only lead to a ridiculous event. "Are you hiding like a coward, Rosier?" William heard the question coming from behind him, stopping his steps in his tracks but saying nothing. "What's the matter, Rosier? Are you a cowardly Gryffindor too?" William didn't need to turn around to know the identity of the person. The only person capable of acting that way was Draco Malfoy, and there was no need to stoop to his level. William continued his steps to the front when he received a blow to the back of his head. He couldn't help but get angry. I mean, who wouldn't get angry when hit by a rock or something similar? The laughter from the Slytherin students and some others was not lacking. William just picked up what was thrown at him and it turned out to be Neville's reminder. Fortunately it didn't break. William's lips opened to say something but quickly closed. It wasn't good to make trouble, he didn't want trouble. It was at the moment that William was putting the rememberer in his pocket when Draco used the broom to approach and snatch it from him. You should be more prudent, Rosier. Keeping other people's things in your pockets is considered stealing, said the boy, mocking William. Gryffindors are not thieves, you should be honorable. That's from Neville. The shout came from the group of students, specifically Hermione Granger, who was looking up at the sky. Yes, that's true. Draco accepted what was said, but if he wants her back he must come for her. Or of course Potter or Rosier can come, of course if Rosier isn't a coward. Chapter 13, Notice and Classes. William held his broom tightly but ignored the insults. Harry didn't hold back. He wasn't William and he didn't have a lifetime of experience. Harry was hot-blooded and easy to provoke. He quickly got on his broom and floated into the sky even when his teammates tried to stop him. With Harry in the sky there was no need for William to go up. He himself had no interest in trouble and it was in the original story for Harry to get on that broom. He had to become the seeker of the Gryffindor House Quidditch team. Some noticed how William was walking away silently with the broom on his shoulder but didn't give it a thought. After all, the focus right now was on Harry and Draco's battle. The flying lesson had finally ended with Harry Potter joining the Quidditch team as a seeker on Professor McGonagall's recommendation. William's existence had gone unnoticed again, or so the reincarnated young man thought. The passage through the common room was quick. He only went for his book as usual and no one paid attention to him. The next class was Charms. In the hallway before entering the classroom he met Draco and his followers. The four people stared in question until Draco laughed sarcastically. You are a pure-blood and heir to the Rosier house. My father told me so. Not only are you not part of Slytherin but you are also in Gryffindor house just like the Weasley traitors. The hat said it was because of your courage, but I know that's not true. You don't have a shred of courage. You're just the usual cowardly Rosier. Another blood traitor like all the Weasleys. Your family must be ashamed. I will write to my father to tell me what your grandfather's reaction is. I will tell you all about it in the great dining room. Look forward to it, Rosier. Draco entered the room laughing, but William himself said nothing, just stood there with a carefree smile on his face. He did not care in the least about the comments of a boy like Draco. William entered the class selecting a seat at random, and his luck was such that Ron was next to him. The class was delivered by Professor Phileas Flitwick, an expert in magical battles, a wizard of half-blood with goblin ancestry. As the class began, Professor Flitwick introduced himself in front of everyone. He quickly did a review of the course and the regular class began. The incantation to begin would be Wingardium Leviosa, the levitatory spell, a simple incantation in the eyes of many. William looked through the books on the table to learn a little more about the spell, the history, the use of the spell, the imitations, flaws, what it actually affects, intonation and wand movements. William himself hadn't realized that the class was already in progress when he was in his book, and if it wasn't for Ron's complaints he hadn't noticed the demonstration made by Professor Flitwick. Don't forget the exercise we practiced. Remember to flip and flick, said the little professor waving his wand. And remember to say the words Wingardium Leviosa. They all nodded at the professor's words and focused their attention on the feathers on their tables. William set to work concentrating only on what he was doing and eliminating all outside noise from his mind, a biological skill gained during his first life in an attempt to study amidst the sound of the big cities. William extended his wand to the front when he saw in front of him two marks he had never seen before. They were segmented lines like the ones he had in calligraphy when he was a kid, like in video game tutorials. Startled, William looked all around, but it seemed that no one else saw it. Not that he wanted to interrupt, so he just followed the lines with his wand, which were ideal for the incantation. Wingardium Leviosa, said William in a muffled tone of voice. The feather in front of him started to levitate slowly, surprising not only William but everyone in the surroundings. Look everyone, Mr. Rosier did it. Very well done, Mr. Rosier, exclaimed Professor Flitwick excitedly, but William did not pay attention to the professor but to what was happening in front of his eyes. Words were not enough to explain what he saw in his eyes. He was finally understanding what was in front of him. he had seen it many times before in his video games when he had leisure time. Incantation Wingardium Leviosa 30% Mastery. Host is suggested to read more books regarding Wingardium Leviosa. His eyes didn't fail him, he could see it, an advertisement for a system. He had no one to explain what was going on, but he really didn't need to now. He could intuit why other people couldn't see what he saw. The mind's eye was an example, and even when he had doubts he was more excited about what was in front of him. The class was still around him, everyone was trying to do the same, many did not succeed, but William did not care now. He had another goal, his destination was the library, he had to experiment more with what he had in front of his eyes. Chapter 14, Library and the Attack. William ran through the corridors without caring about the looks of the people around him, he never really cared about them. When he got to the library he stopped in his tracks and organized his uniform a little. He didn't want to give a bad first impression. You don't need any more of those impressions. Madame Pants watched William walk in. He had been in the librarian job for some time, so it was a surprise to see a young first year in the library just after home. "Hello, I need all about the Wingardium Leviosa enchantment." "Wingardium Leviosa?" asked Madame Pants in surprise. "Isn't that the first incantation taught in Professor Flitwick's classes?" "Exactly the same one," nodded William. "Child, I admire your eagerness to learn, but you don't need to focus on Wingardium Leviosa. Professor Flitwick will go over it for several days so that you know its structure and the history of the charm itself." "I know, I just need more information to check some notes. Where can I find related books?" Seeing William's animated expression, Madame Pants could only sigh wearily. Here are listed all the books with the information on Wingardium Leviosa. We also have one written in Yarlith Hobart's own handwriting. William went through the library and looked for the books just as Madame Pants's note pointed out. He picked up all the books there were regarding the enchantment and began to read them while writing down a few things on his own sheet. Madame Pants kept an eye on him from time to time to see what William was doing. There was nothing strange to her eyes, but the truth was not so simple. Behind what she could see there were several bars with messages placed on William's eyes. Incantation Wingardium Leviosa 41% Mastery. The time to hold an item in the air was raised by 50%. The maximum weight of items to lift was increased by 70%. The more William investigated, the more mastery he had over the spell, and it could be reflected in the familiarity he had with it. Every time he used it the movements were more fluid, the intonation was faster, it consumed less magic, it lasted longer, and he was even able to lift two objects at the same time. Madame Pants was watching him from afar, and she was obviously noticing the rapid advances of the incantation in the young first year. It was a simple incantation, she knew, but it was not easy for an inexperienced wizard to get to that point with books alone. Familiarity with the Wingardium Leviosa enchantment advanced to 60%. Consumption of the Wingardium Leviosa enchantment was 90%. Objects up to 100 times the host's weight can be lifted. The maximum time of the enchantment depends on the weight of the target. Can be used on living targets. Multiple targets can be lifted. Ah! William let out an exhausted sigh as he finished reading several books on the subject. There were still several of these left, but he could already feel the change regarding the enchantment. It wasn't the same as the Wingardium Leviosa he had been taught in class. Now he could lift several objects at the same time, and he could also lift living beings. The incantation that Professor Flitwick had taught in class was different, and the same professor said that Wingardium Leviosa did not lift living objects. William tried to reach out his hand to see more about the strange advertisements in his eyes, but his hand only went through these advertisements. They also do not respond to his commands. It was unclear how it was that this all worked, but there were a few things that were clear. First, the mind's eye is a map of all the surroundings, preventing things from being able to hide, practically the same sight that bats possess. Second, the system that William can see is a type of spell library. The more you study it, the more understanding of the spell you will have, therefore the stronger the spell or incantation will be. Third, apparently only William could see the advertisements, but they did not pay any attention to them. The question that remained was whether the library would also be useful for potions. Finally William closed the book in his hands, causing Madame Pants to turn her attention back to him, and his stomach growled with hunger. Wow! I'm hungry. And you should hurry, all your classmates should be in the dining room and there is very little time left. If you run you will be in time to have a drink. William heard Madame Pants's words and got up from his seat, arranging all the books. Don't worry and just go, I'll arrange the books. A wave of his wand was enough to make the books float to their corresponding places. Thank you. William said goodbye to the attendant. As soon as the silver-haired young man left the library he ran down the corridors towards the dining room. With the help of his mind's eye it would not be difficult to get to the dining room, it was practically impossible to get lost. As the young man ran through the halls he felt a different energy than usual, the mind's eye locked directly on the target. What is that? Asked William aloud, walking towards the place from which the magic was emitted. As he was 50 feet from his target he could see the large silhouette in the women's restroom, a troll. William quickly remembered of this event and by extending his mind's eye he gained understanding of what was happening. It was the troll that Quirrell let in to gain the opportunity to steal the Philosopher's Stone. In one of the cubicles in the bathroom was Hermione Granger, hiding, watching from the lowest part, looking for help. William, she said softly, calling out to the white-haired man who was in the corridor away from danger. Due to the effects of the mind's eye William could hear the girl's voice in his mind. He himself knew what he had to do, but if he were to intrude he would ruin the friendship of the Golden Trio. After all, the trio's friendship was formed in that event. Chapter 15, Up and Down. William was looking at the troll. He was not afraid of the enemy giant but afraid of changing history, but the orders and the girl's moans of pain made William's mind waver. When William realized he was already only a few steps away from the troll and his wand was extended to the front, his expression was dull. It showed no fear or courage, as his expression on the worst occasions was neutral. Hey you stupid fucker, mess with someone your own size, William said, looking at the giant. Gaining the giant's attention slightly, the troll turned with his club in his hand. He was ready to strike the small wizard, but the wizard looked at him, ready for the attack. The troll leaned backwards, gaining strength to sweep William with his club, but at that moment he lost his balance. His body began to slowly rise and the club fell to the ground. Wingardium Leviosa, William muttered, extending his magic. The understanding of this simple incantation caused William's strength to increase quite a bit. Once the troll was lifted to the ceiling, the incantation was released, causing the troll to fall to the ground with great speed. The blow was not strong enough to knock the troll out and it struggled to get up, but William used the incantation again to lift it to the ceiling and bring it back down. Hermione was watching the scene and how William managed to defeat the troll single-handedly. She was watching as the troll went up and down at great speed. The troll had no time to defend itself and could only struggle to withstand the blows. The troll had lost consciousness on the 5th blow, but William would not stop and had already been struck 12 times by the time the teachers arrived on the scene. William didn't notice the moment when Harry and Ron arrived, as he was really concentrating on his battle, if you could call it that. The professors were shocked to see what was happening. William still wouldn't stop and the troll kept going up and down. The ground was covered in blood and the face of the troll's face was already disfigured. The enemy was dead, but William didn't seem to want to stop. Immobilis, exclaimed Professor McGonagall, stopping both William and the troll in mid-air. Can you hear me, William Rosier? William blinked to imply that he was conscious. The professor sighed and released the spell, dropping the troll and freeing William. Explain to me what is going on here, said the teacher, regaining her composure as she looked at William and the 3 boys present. It's my fault, Professor McGonagall admitted the young girl in front of all the teachers. I came looking for the mountain troll on my own. I thought I could take him on by myself, but I was wrong. If it wasn't for William, the first wouldn't have made it out alive. Harry and Ron only came looking for me because they were worried. We were able to witness young William's performance in his battle against the troll, if you can call this a battle. Professor McGonagall looked back down at the mangled mountain troll on the floor. Her expression was not the best and she didn't seem to be upset, but somehow surprised. 5 points off for Gryffindor for his complete lack of judgment. As for young Rosier, it will be 20 points for Gryffindor. I don't remember records of a wizard of his age being able to murder a mountain troll. Not many live to tell the tale. The teachers left and William did not stay in the place. He was the first to leave and retire to the common room. He had an empty stomach. his magic was practically exhausted and the battle against the troll had left his adrenaline in the clouds. Before going to bed, his destination was the showers. He stripped off his clothes covered in troll blood and showered to relax. When he was done in the shower, William went straight to bed. Using too much magic isn't good for the body either, and the next day he had to attend classes. The news of the troll's defeat was not made public, and William himself had no interest in letting others know of his abilities. From that day on he started going to classes regularly, but at break time he would head to the library to read books. Now that he had in his possession the magical library named after himself, he could learn spells faster and in a purer way than his peers, Wingardium Leviosa being the example of his way of learning. The spells William focused on were all first-year spells. He wanted to learn as much as possible and experiment as much as possible with his biological ability. Those incantations or spells selected were Lumos, the illumination incantation; Incendio, the fire lighting incantation; Diffindo, the selecting incantation which allows to break objects partially, the beginning of learning about transformation, and several others. Madame Pants was surprised. Most of the first-year students just gave the spells a spin and then left to the library, or else they went to more advanced spells, but William was different. He looked for the information in depth of a single spell even when he could already use it. Obviously Madame Pants was aware of what happened with the troll and knew of William's method of study, nothing out of the ordinary. Chapter 16, Lottery Winnings. The days continued to pass quietly and William's knowledge increased greatly. Of the spells learned, only one reached 100%, this was Lumos, the lighting enchantment. Having 100% understanding of the incantation, William could now illuminate the tip of his wand with quite a bit of control. Depending on the magic used in the incantation was the exposure of the light, but the maximum limit is comparable to Lumos' maxima of any other wizard. The library was practically his second home. Being despised by his housemates, he didn't have many friends and continued his thorough search for adventure. It was one Tuesday morning while he was eating after his morning classes when a group of owls came through the window. Everyone was surprised by the number of birds on the students, and William was one of them, but his surprise grew more when he noticed that he himself was the target of the owls. Several bags were placed on the table in front of the astonished William. Each of the bags had a card which left the magician more surprised. When he lifted the card he could see the note. "Congratulations, you were the winner of the Goblin Lottery. Congratulations, you were the winner of the Leprechaun Lottery. Congratulations, you were the winner of the Elves Lottery." All the letters were congratulations for having won the lottery. William expected to win, but more than anything he expected to have to go and collect the prizes himself. The letters also only had one sentence which presumably was written with some displeasure. The goblins hated to give away their money, and right now William won quite a lot, or that could be seen from the bags. William opened one of the bags, finding several gold galleons. He reached in and could feel that there were several ways. He read the small note again, 1,000 galleons. The young man checked each one of the cards and all of them had the same message. 19 of the 20 bags had the message of 1,000 galleons, plus the bags had the necessary space to carry the coins inside. Now that he had that amount of money in his possession, William felt a weight less on his back. It didn't matter if his grandfather expelled him from the castle, he would be able to fend for himself having that money. William couldn't help but laugh silently. Many of the worries he felt now were nothing. He could continue learning with peace of mind. As long as he wasn't expelled from Hogwarts, then everything was fine. When he was organizing the bags, he noticed the last one, the one that had a different note from the others. This one did not have gold coins but a white egg, completely round. William put the egg in his hands, ignorant of the contents inside it. He looked everywhere and noticed that the attention was on himself, so he decided to put it away again and leave the dining room. He had to discover the contents of the egg, but it was not the right place or the right time. As soon as William left the dining hall to go check the egg and put away his winnings, all the students started talking about it. "Did you see it?" asked Ron, looking at Harry next to him, who nodded. "Those were all lottery owls. My brother Charlie told me about it, but there were never that many prizes together." "So he's really lucky?" asked Harry innocently, to which Ron just shook his head in the negative. "He can't possibly be that lucky, he obviously cheated. After all, he is the son of a dark wizard." "But he saved Hermione from the troll earlier." That was just a mistake, McGonagall said it herself. It is impossible for a student to kill a mountain troll and you saw it yourself. William was smiling when he was attacking the troll with his spell. He is an evil wizard, we both know it. Ron was filling his mouth as he commented on what had happened days ago. They were both present during the attacks on the troll, before the professors arrived on the scene. Yet William saved Hermione, she said so herself. You don't understand, Harry, Hermione was just wrong. Fear wouldn't let her think and she only believed what she saw. Ron had a certain contempt for conservative pure-blood wizards. Among those clearly were the Rosiers, but Harry, who didn't understand much about the wizarding world and being a long-time object of abuse himself, knew that not all people are like their families are. Hermione, who was a few stands away from the duo, could only sigh helplessly. She knew all too well what she had seen. That night of the attack she could see William in the hallway away from the troll. She called out to him quietly but knew her voice would not reach him. Still William confronted the troll. At first she thought William didn't know she was in the place, but using the Wingardium Leviosa charm he pushed the troll away, allowing her to escape. It was obvious he knew of her existence. Hermione tried to talk to William several times but he would quickly disappear at the end of class hours, and when he was in the library he was so focused that it was best not to disturb him. Only at meals was he at peace, but he would seek out the farthest stalls. She couldn't understand him. William was a rare wizard like no other at Hogwarts. Wizards are carefree and try to fit in with their houses, but William didn't seem to care at all about his peers. Chapter 17. Chapter 17, The Egg Creature. William did not pay attention to the looks of the people. He did not really care about them. Now he had something more important in his hands, and it was none other than the egg in his hands. Without stopping his steps he left the castle grounds and headed towards the only person who could help him with his problem. He needed the help of a specialist in the subject, and there was one person in his mind, Rubeus Hagrid. Hagrid right now was the Hogwarts warden, and it wouldn't be for another 2 years when he would be able to enjoy the prestige of being the professor in charge of the magical creature care class. As a future professor of magical creature care he had a lot of experience regarding the subject. William made his way to the half-giant's hut, a rather humble wooden hut with a pumpkin garden in front of it. William knocked loudly on the door. He took 2 breaths waiting until when the door finally opened, revealing the figure of the half-giant. Who are you? Hello, I'm William Rosier. William introduced himself fearlessly, making Hagrid startle just hearing his last name. Rosier. Yes, my last name is quite famous. William rubbed his neck uncomfortably and in a bad way. Hagrid looked up at the sky and sighed. You don't have to tell me anything about your family. What do you need from me? William could understand Hagrid's reaction. The half-giant was a member of the Order of the Phoenix, enemies of the Death Eaters, that is to say enemies of the Rosier family. Leaving all family matters behind, William pulled out the egg that had come as a prize in the lottery. He didn't know how it was possible for an egg to be a prize, but he wouldn't deny the opportunity to care for a magical beast either. This egg, William pointed out. What is the species of this egg? By Merlin's beard, exclaimed Hagrid in surprise. Where did you get this egg? I got it for a lottery prize, but it didn't say anything about its species. I thought you would know about its species since you are the Hogwarts Ranger. I didn't want to go to the Professor of Magical Creatures because they would snatch the egg from me if it became too dangerous. William decided to go the honest route. Gaining the trust of this character would bring him many benefits in the future. Hagrid sighed, looked at William and looked around. Come in, we'd better talk inside. Following the giant's instructions he entered the hut with the egg close by. Have a seat. William sat down in the chair and faced Hagrid, who was still holding the egg in his hands. This egg belongs to a rather special species of magical creature, one classified as dangerous. So do you know what species it belongs to? Asked William impatiently. Do I? Asked Hagrid. Of course I do. It is one of the most impressive magical creatures of all. Even its figure is at the entrance to Headmaster Albus Dumbledore's office. It's a griffin, exclaimed William in surprise. Yes, I know it is impressive, even I am very impressed with this. I have never had the opportunity to raise a griffin, but if you want I can advise you regarding the subject, of course if you wish. This is incredible, said William, interrupting Hagrid as he looked at the egg carefully. A griffin. Will be a huge responsibility considering that I probably won't be able to keep it inside the castle. If someone finds out, the griffin would be in danger and at home. No, my grandfather won't want to have a magical creature. I doubt he would want me in the castle now. Hagrid raised his eyebrows at William's comment, surprised at what he was hearing. William out of nowhere turned around to look at Hagrid. I know this is a bit unfair and I may be abusing our short friendship, but would you help me take care of the griffin? Once again Hagrid was surprised. It was the first time that a pure-blood wizard like William asked him for a favor. He himself knew that these wizards were not what could be called friendly with his kind. The last time he met a similar wizard was Sirius Black, who later became the Potter's traitor. While he had no problem helping William, he was hesitant to give support to a young man like this. He didn't want trouble with pure-blood wizards, but at the same time he was curious about griffins. Sigh. Sighed Hagrid, closing his eyes as he made a decision. Fine, I'll help you with everything for the griffin, until you can take care of it yourself. Thank you. Smiled William, pleased at the response obtained from the half-giant. He quickly took his leave to return to the castle with the egg in tow, now with a big goal in his mind. The more time he spent at Hogwarts, the more things he learned and the more impressed he became. He now had the egg of a magical creature. Chapter 18, Broom Race. During the broom flying lessons, everyone tried their best not to fall and to learn the correct handling. William was no exception to this. Hermione was not very good at broom flying. Even when she tried her best, she was not good enough. She lost her balance and her control over the broom was mediocre. Draco Malfoy, on the other hand, could handle the broom to perfection. Presumably he was instructed a long time ago. After all, he belongs to a family of pure-blooded wizards. Ron Weasley, on the other hand, was deplorable, but he was the one who put the most effort into it. His dream was to be a professional Quidditch player, the dream of many wizards in their childhood, the equivalent of the football dream of Muggle children. Harry Potter still had to participate in the classes, but he was dedicated to help his friend and practice his own control. After all, he was the seeker of the Gryffindor team. William, on the other hand, stayed away from the group and flew slowly. Everyone thought it was because he was bad with the broom and didn't want to show it, but the truth was different. He was lying on the broom face up reading his book while flying. Thanks to his mind's eye, it was impossible for him to crash. He was increasing his ability to control the broom at the same time he was studying about the care of the taps. Rosier called, a shrill voice gaining William's attention. There was Madame Hooch blowing her whistle. Hurry, we will have a race to measure control over the broom. William's gaze went to his classmates, who were all getting organized. Many seemed excited about the subject of the race, among these Ron, Harry, Draco, and the latter's followers. William gave a long sigh as he ordered his broom to move with a steady speed towards the racing line. "All ready!" exclaimed Madame Hooch, looking at her students who were getting ready for the race. That included William, who put down his book. "Ready!" Another sigh from William, and Madame Hooch finally signaled the start of the race with her whistle. William's broom was moving to the front with great speed, but not overtaking the front runners. He wasn't racing, he was simply following the teacher's instructions. He didn't care about the children's race, after all they were children. "Move, you blood traitor!" exclaimed Malfoy out of nowhere, taking a swipe with his broom towards William, forcing William to dodge it in surprise. The race was going badly. Draco was behind Harry and Ron. That made Malfoy angry and he took it out on William, but this was the worst choice he could have made. William was never a competitive person, but he wasn't one to be intimidated either. He wouldn't allow a person like Draco to intimidate him. William frowned, took possession on his broom and squeezed the mast hard. Having ridden motorcycles during his previous life, he had quite a bit of experience driving, and that would be demonstrated in front of everyone. William's broom suddenly accelerated as if he had pushed the throttle to full throttle, but this was mostly the fact that William injected his hand inside the broom. Draco was still concentrating on his run and didn't notice when William was next to him with an expression full of evil. "Move it, pure blood! Ruin the view!" William's broom quickly overtook Draco's and Ron's and went head to head with Harry. Harry looked to his side in surprise. He never expected it would be William who would catch up. He expected the race to be decided between him and Draco. There was no time for words. That was right, as he himself was the Gryffindor seeker. He couldn't lose in a race. William's broom accelerated again, slowly overtaking Harry Potter. It was there when they reached the finish line. The difference between Harry's broom and William's broom was not noticeable, but they both knew who won. They all made it to the finish line. Draco was the most frustrated as he only came in third. He was able to overtake Ron but didn't stand a chance against Harry and William. That was a good race, boys. I haven't seen such fast runners among the first years in a long time. Not only Mr. Potter but also Mr. Malfoy and Mr. Rosier. They are all excellent at riding the broom. Madam Hooch was delighted with the students' performance. You are dismissed. William got off the broom and left it in place. He was the first to disappear, and not specifically to go to lunch but to go directly to the common room to study the state of the egg. He didn't want to miss a single detail about the birth of his griffin. Besides, William had everything written down in a notebook. As it was lunchtime, there were no people in the common room and even less in the dormitories, so it was the perfect time for William to study his griffin egg. He followed all the instructions in the books, so there should be no problems, and Hagrid always advised him about it. Most of the day there were no problems, or that was what William thought until that moment. He could never expect that the piece he had would end out of nowhere. Chapter 19, Potions and Ravenclaw. Christmas vacations were approaching, but William had no interest in returning home. He still hoped to live longer in this second life, due to the Hat's decision and that he now belongs to Gryffindor. His grandfather and family would not accept him. The research on first-year spells did not have a great momentum. Even when he gave reading all kinds of books, there were no substantive changes leading the young wizard to a different research. Spells that seemed useless for other novice wizards, but for him they were treasures. One of them specifically was Petrificus Totalis. It is a curse that leaves the victim totally immobile. As William was reading a book standing on the side of a bookshelf as he usually did, he heard conversation coming from the entrance of the library. He could recognize the specific voice of Madame Pants, the librarian. "The boil healing potion?" asked Madame Pants. The voice reached William's ears, who preferred not to listen any longer but to return to his book. "The boy over there on the shelves researched that potion a few weeks ago. I remember hearing him say he was able to make it with 4 different fully tested methods. If you ask him, I'm sure he will help you." Madame Pants looked at William out of the corner of her eye, laughing evilly, while the latter sighed wearily. Obviously the librarian meant well, but the truth was that he was not shy. It was just that the people around him avoided contact with him, and William himself had no interest in interacting with others. While William was complaining inside, he didn't notice the presence of the 2 girls in front of him, 2 young girls of the same age as William but both belonging to Ravenclaw House, the House of Wisdom. "Hello," greeted one of the girls with embarrassment, looking at the white-haired young man with a book in his hand. "Madame Pants," she said. "Don't worry, I heard when she mentioned me." Her tone was too loud to overlook. "Being the librarian, you would think such things wouldn't happen, but I see sometimes rules are broken," William mentioned with a normal tone, looking at the girls as he closed his book. "I hear you, boy," replied Madame Pants, making the girls laugh. "What's the problem?" asked William, putting aside his book and taking a seat at the nearest table. The girls followed closely behind him. William's eyes did not deceive him, and even though he did not have all his past life memories fresh, he could recognize the 2 girls in front of him, or well, partially intuit their identities. The first one was easier to know her identity. After all, she transformed into one of the most hated characters of the saga, Harry Potter's first girlfriend and the first one who broke his heart, young Cho Chang. A beautiful girl with long, shiny, dark hair, freckled nose, and a little shorter than one might expect. Of course, it was a more youthful version than adapted in the film. The most surprising thing in William's eyes was that she was a first year. According to the books, she should be a second year, but apparently there were some differences with what he knew. Some things were the same as the movies, others, like the books, he had no information to rely on. Inferring the identities of the people, William was able to recognize the second girl as Cho Chang's best friend. That is to say, that girl was Marietta Edgecombe, the young girl who in the future would inform on Dumbledore's army in front of Dolores Umbridge and later would be punished with a spell made for informers, so her face was filled with pimples that formed the word snitch for the rest of her life. "The boil healing potion, we always have trouble brewing, somehow they always end up producing boils," Cho Chang said as he pulled out his notebook with notes from potions class. William took the notebook and pointed out some typical mistakes or facts that used to be overlooked, like using Bulbadox powders to make the cauldron explode. Another fact also was to remove the cauldron from the fire before adding the porcupine quills, otherwise the cauldron would melt, creating a horrible smell, and in case the formula spilled it will make the skin of those affected burst into cruel boils. Madam Pants said you had 4 methods of making the potion. Professor Snape only mentioned one and the books mention another. What are the other 2 methods? Marietta was direct with her question, earning a glare from William and a smirk full of arrogance. Noticing her friend's impudence, Cho Chang did not delay in interfering to persuade William, even though this was unnecessary. We would like to know about the 2 methods of preparation that are not mentioned in the school books. I know they are your methods, but... No problem, neither method is mine, just look a little further in the books to find one more method. The third one also has 10 steps like the other 2. William wrote the steps on the page of Cho Chang's notebook. As Professor Snape is an expert in potions, it is 100% likely that he knows this method. 1. Heat the cauldron until the potion turns red. 2. Heat it again until turns green. 3. Pour flobberworm mucus until the potion turns pink. 4. Heat again until it turns orange. 5. Mix the dried nettles until it turns green. 6. Heat again until it turns blue. 7. Mix crushed snake fangs until the potion turns pink. 8. Mix porcupine quills until the potion turns orange. 9. Pour stewed horn slugs until it turns turquoise. 10. And last, heat the potion until it turns red. Continuing to heat until it turns pink turns the brew more effective. It seems simpler than the others mentioned, Marietta, looking at the instructions and struggling to memorize them quickly, but Cho Chang looked at William again. What's the 4th way? William couldn't help but smile, seeing the seriousness on Cho Chang's face. She really wanted to learn about the potion. That was the first impression in William's mind, who didn't hesitate to write the formula on the paper. He was not sure how many other people knew about that recipe, but William discovered it with the help of the mind's eye on the way to increase the understanding of the potion to the maximum. 1. Stir the starting position clockwise until the mixture changes from blue to red. 2. Add flobberworm mucus until the potion turns pink. 3. Sprinkle dried nettles into the potion, which will turn green. 4. Crush snake fangs in a mortar and pestle, then add them to the cauldron until the potion turns yellow. 5. Add horn slugs until the potion turns blue. 6. Stir clockwise until the potion turns red again. Only 6 steps? Asked Cho Chang, looking at William again. Yes, this is a simplified version and you can get the potion in half the time it would cost you with the previous methods, plus the potion will be twice as potent. William jotted down several details under the formula. Half the time and twice as potent, Cho Chang muttered under his breath again. If you marketed this you could make a fortune and even earn a name in the Hall of Fame. Since Cho Chang was a child she couldn't see the whole picture of things, and William had no interest in explaining every single thing to her, so she simply shook her head. It's just a little recipe, nothing special. William continued chatting with Cho for a while longer, explaining every single doubt both girls had until finally it was time to say goodbye. Thank you, William, Cho said with a smile on her face. William was surprised. He had never mentioned her name before and he had never heard Madame Pants do it before. How do I know your name? Asked Cho, to which William nodded. You are famous at school, plus not many wizards have white hair and are part of Gryffindor. I admit I was hesitant to talk to you, but you didn't turn out to be as scary as in the rumors. By the way, my name is Cho Chang, I'm from Ravenclaw. We can talk more in detail another day. Cho walked out of the library with her friend in tow, leaving William stunned looking at the exit. Is this the first time you talk to a girl? Asked Madame Pants at William's side. You look like a freshman, try to comb your hair more often and avoid having so many dark circles under your eyes. Chapter 20, Natural Enemies. Classes for Defense Against the Dark Arts, one of the most popular subjects at Hogwarts but also the most controversial throughout history due to its excessive change of instructors. William, like all first-year students, had this subject in his academic load as compulsory. The truth was the only subject that no wizard was against learning. The professor on duty was Quirinus Quirrell, a tall, thin and fair-skinned wizard, very pale in William's eyes, but William himself knew the reason. The professor's left eye had a nervous twitch and he stuttered when he spoke, besides shaking on many occasions. In the eyes of the younger wizards he was nothing more than a coward, and they made fun of the professor in hushed voices or in the corridors. The He-Hex Reject Fli Flipendo can be used to stun several enemies or activate some swit CHES. Professor Quirrell's halting voice could barely be heard to the farthest links of the hall, which is where William was sitting with several papers in his hands. He was not paying attention directly to Quirrell's words, as the Flipendo is a spell he already had in his repertoire from a few days ago. William was not interested in any of the professor's words. Truth be told, Quirrell's stuttering was getting on his nerves, and that was why William was focused on his papers, a sheet where to write down the magic formulas and possible changes that could be made to it. Wait until the wand glow is a strong purple color. How do you know that? William looked to the side, noticing the girl who was focused on her papers. What happens if the light changes to another color? Weren't you in the front stalls? Asked William as he recognized Hermione Granger, the student with the nickname Bookworm. That nickname would also be William's nickname if William wasn't the son of a Death Eater. Instead, among the students they call him the Little Death Eater. I wanted to see the class in a more distant view. I know the spell anyway, and I see you are doing the same, Hermione said calmly, proving herself worthy of the nickname Bookworm for the Slytherin students' jokes. William would also be called a bookworm if it wasn't for the prestige of his family. Instead, he is called a little morph wizard by all the students in the school. I'm just taking little notes, mentioned William, placing a note on his sheet with the Flipendo charm. If you let the color go from strong lilac red, then the spell will go in the opposite direction, bouncing off the user, but if you force it quickly to get to dark red, then you will have a triple effect. The problem is that you must have at least the strength of an adult to get to the red light. Red light? Asked Hermione. I knew something about the lilac red light, but I hadn't noticed anything about the red light. Where did you get the information? At the girl's question, William pulled out a sheet again and handed it to her. Here are the spell calculations. You won't find it in a book because no one seems to want to write it down. Or no one has ever figured it out before, Hermione interrupted, looking at William again. This is a new spell, it's not the original Flipendo. As of this moment it is only a variable of an enchantment already created, besides it is in the theory phase. I don't have enough power to demonstrate it in front of everyone, and it will stay that way for a while. William settled back in the back of the chair while leaving some of his attention on Quirrell's lessons. He didn't want to transform himself into this wizard's target, at least not for now. Did you do the same thing with the troll? What? That day when the troll entered the castle, you confronted it and killed it. You used a spell that was taught in class, but you used it in a different way. Hermione looked at William again. I would never have thought of doing it that way. Besides, Wingardium Leviosa can't lift living things. William scratched his head in annoyance. He had one of the main characters of the saga next to him asking about her spells. It would be simple to confuse her, but after a while she would figure it out. The best course of events in William's mind was to teach her how he did it. It is due to the use of Muggle theories so that magic will change its natural course and evolve in a different way. Muggle theories, exclaimed Hermione, getting up from her seat and consequently gaining the attention of everyone in the classroom, including Quirrell. I'm sorry, Professor, apologized the girl. William could see Ron chuckle on the bottom, but the moment the two of them made eye contact he stopped laughing. Hermione returned to her seat and muttered, how was it that you used Muggle theories? I used the theory of gravity employed by Isaac Newton and the atomic theory promulgated by many physicists. William gave a vague answer, but Hermione was more shocked by this. For her, coming from a Muggle society, she had yet to come into contact with such knowledge, and it was well known that wizards hated Muggles as well as their knowledge. But here was William, a pure-blood wizard of the same age as her but with more knowledge about Muggle society than hers, to the point of being able to implement it into magic. William Rosier, could you step forward to demonstrate? Quirrell called to the white-haired man from the far end of the stands. Sure. William stepped forward, walked across the classroom to the front. See, can you use the incantation? Asked Quirrell. William waved his wand calmly and cast his incantation towards one of the test dummies. This dummy swung backwards from the force of the incantation, surprising everyone. Quirrell clapped his hands happily. Good, Ellie, let's go to the next one. But I would like Professor Quirrell to help me in a practice combat of this charm. I propose a friendly duel in front of the class. William smiled and extended his hand towards the professor. I think it is the best way to do a practice for the defenses of the dark arts. At William's suggestion, all the students asked for the friendly duel to become a reality, and even though Professor Quirrell wanted to refuse, in the end he ended up giving up in the face of the pressure. Chapter 21, Flipendo. Professor Quirrell straightened up, looking at William. The air around him changed, slightly imperceptible to others, but the mind's eye could not be fooled. William's senses quivered and even his skin went goosebumps. Right now it could be his first fight against the greatest dark wizard in history, or well, the parasitic form of it at least, his father's boss, so to speak. It will be a test duel, Quirrell said without stuttering and without trembling. Only the Flipendo charm can be used, and this will be a sample for the rest of the class. If Mr. Rosier succeeds in giving me, then Gryffindor will have 20 points as a prize. I would have done it even without the points. William tightened his wand, taking the position of a regulation duel, back to back with Professor Quirrell. At that moment he used his mind's eye to see Voldemort's appearance. The dark wizard's face was embedded in Quirrell's head, and it was several times more terrifying than the movie adaptation. William could even tell that Voldemort was staring at him. The Rosier traitor will learn a lesson. Messing with a professor is not a game, laughed Draco, along with his followers, waiting expectantly for this duel to unfold. Hermione had known William for a moment, but there was no denying that he saved her earlier. She was nervous and even found William a bit too rash a person to ask for a duel with a professor as if it was a game. Ron and Harry, on the other hand, were excited. It would be the first time they would see a duel like this. They both witnessed William's skills against the troll that entered the castle, so they were looking forward to seeing how he defeated Professor Quirrell. Ron would have wished the fight was against Snape, but that would never happen. No one wanted to mess with Snape. William and Quirrell slowly separated back to back and took up fighting positions. Quirrell had a professional stance without many holes, unlike William, who decided to mimic Snape's stance during his duel against Gilderoy Lockhart. Flipendo. It was obvious that the first to finish the spell would be Quirrell. Many students speculated it, but what he didn't know was that William was expecting it as well. No, you could tell William was watching where the spell would be cast. William leapt to the side, avoiding the spell while using his own spell, as the light from his wand was a strong lilac red. The charm moved quickly, but Quirrell was quicker to move, almost to the point of floating. Flipendo! Exclaimed Quirrell again, this time with the spell stronger and faster. Will was fast, but not too fast. This time he himself knew it was impossible to dodge it, but there was a solution. He lifted his cloak and threw it against the spell, being the one affected and not his body, but at the same time serving as a distraction. The students and Quirrell saw the cloak fly, but William was not there. William crawled under the demonstration table while concentrating the magic on his varia until he was only a few steps away from the professor. William's position was disastrous and not at all advisable. He was lying on the floor, pointing his wand upwards. Gotcha, said William, smiling. Flipendo. The spell went off, not towards Professor Quirrell's body but towards the turban. The target in the eyes of the white-haired man was none other than the turban. If he destroys it, then Voldemort's identity would be exposed. Dumbledore will have to act out of obligation, and everything would be resolved before the Christmas vacations. Quirrell's eyes made evident the fear towards that magic. He took several steps back with a speed never seen before while holding the turban on his head. That's it, he said out of nowhere, surprising those present. 20 points for Gryffindor. You may leave the class. And Mr. Rosier, it was an excellent demonstration. William got up from the floor and cleaned his clothes. Ditto Professor Quirrell, but I know you held back with me. I am grateful to you for accepting my request. William bowed and went for his robe that was far away. The students soon left the room, still with the duel alive in their minds. I mean, not many times can you see duels between students and teachers, let alone seeing a student corner a teacher. William was still shaking out his robes as he walked out of the classroom and could notice Hermione waiting for him outside. It was a totally reckless action and outside the rules. Duels between teachers and students are forbidden. Yes? Asked William in surprise. I wasn't aware. I just wanted to experience the feeling of a duel and test the theory of my enchantment, but to no avail. I couldn't take Flipendo all the way to the 3rd level. You still earned 20 points for Gryffindor. Points are of no interest to me. If the house wins the duel, I gain nothing. I would prefer a personal prize. William finally put on his cloak. Still, I suppose for the rest it's a good thing I won those points. At least others benefited from the emptiest prize of all. I know I told you I would explain more about my formulas, but I think that will be another time. Now I have to go to the ranger's hut. Excuse me. William walked away from Hermione. Obviously his first direction was to the dormitories to retrieve the egg. With Hagrid? Asked Hermione, surprised, looking at the boy's back. Chapter 22, Chapter 22, The Limits of Imagination. Finally I find you. Hermione stood in front of William, who was reading a book in the library on the side of a bookshelf near the forbidden section. The book in question was about the Tarrant Legra enchantment, the dancing feet enchantment. William turned his attention away from the book and looked at the girl. What's wrong? You said you would teach me about spells and muggle theories, said Hermione, showing several papers in her hands. I prepared for this, but it's been 3 days since you said that and I couldn't find you anywhere. You didn't show up in the common room. I've been waiting for you. Ah, I've been busy. I have a lot of books to read and I came to the common room after curfew. After? Exclaimed Hermione, looking at the white-haired man. How is it possible you didn't get caught? William lifted his shoulders innocently. The truth was that he did know, but he couldn't say. The mind's eye was a secret to himself. But well, you're already here, then I might as well explain right now. William closed the book and moved to a nearby table where his own belongings were. They both took a seat facing each other. What did you say? The question was about Wingardium Leviosa, when you used it against the mountain troll. Ah, I remember, said William, about levitation and troll impacts. First of all I will ask, what is the difference between levitatory, rocket, glider and float enchantment? The levitatory enchantment is used to make objects fly or levitate, while the others are its variations. The rocket charm causes the target to rise at a high speed, the gliding charm allows the object to move in the air, and the gliding charm is a less magic-consuming variation. Hermione answered quickly and just as William was expecting, i.e. it is the correct answer for an exam. But based on what point does an object float or levitate? Hermione pointed her finger upwards. What would happen if I am standing on the ceiling and I want to make an object levitate? Asked William, pointing upwards again. Hermione's great intelligence quickly got the idea. If it's on the ceiling, then your up is to the floor. If you're on the left, your up is right, and also the other way around. That means it depends on the perspective you are pointing at. The levitating charm is simply a mind game based on gravity, that invisible force that keeps objects stuck to the ground, the magic of nature explained by the Muggle Isaac Newton in the 17th century. Gravity? Asked Hermione, doubting a bit what William was saying, but he simply picked up a book and dropped it on the floor. Gravity, he repeated again, the energy that forces objects and people to reach the ground. Everything is based on the electromagnetic fields of the earth, but those are things you must learn in detail. The most important thing right now is the mind. Wingardium Leviosa is an incantation that makes the object float according to your perspective of position, and that itself allows the displacement. All the variations of the incantation are just that, unnecessary variations. The only thing necessary is the main incantation and the mental perspective. But what about the troll? Asked Hermione again. I based it on the atomic theory of atoms. Everything is composed of atoms, and these are not considered living things. Again, there is the perspective of enchantment. The fact that you cannot levitate a living body means that there is a compound or a physical spectrum that is incompatible, but we know that inanimate objects can be levitated. Now we just have to look for the things that both possess. In this case, both possess atoms, and if the atoms can be levitated, then you don't need to levitate the body but the atoms surrounding the body, making an invisible suit that covers the target. The rest is magic. William invoked the spell on himself and Hermione, making them both float slightly. Magic depends on the head. The more open-minded you are, the more you can do, William said. Hermione was delighted to see that she was floating with such a simple spell as Wingardium Leviosa. They spent the afternoon together in the library, with William explaining each of the things that influenced his spells, giving answers to all the doubts that the girl had. When they finished with their studies, the sun was falling to the ground and the light was disappearing. It's time to go back. So soon? Asked William, looking out the window. Madame Pans is still in the library. Are you leaving after her? Of course, someone has to make sure no one is inside, expressed William with false pride. Still, I think it's better to go back to the common room before it's too late. I don't want to get a punishment. Hermione got up and pulled William by the arm, forcing the latter to follow. Between sighs, the white-haired boy could only walk while his belongings followed him floating. As they left the library, William followed Hermione closely until they ran head-on into two black-haired students who looked exactly alike. Jessica, isn't that William Rosier, the little Gryffindor failure who walked past us? Your eyes are undamaged, Damien. He certainly is our little failure brother, smiled the Slytherin student, waving her wand slightly. Did you forget to show respect to your older brothers? Who are they? Asked Hermione, whispering to William's side. William let out a long tired sigh. They are my siblings, Jessica and Damien Rosier, both belonging to Slytherin House, as you may notice. The house you fortunately don't belong to. A failure like you is not worthy of being with the true purebloods. For you it's better to hide next to the Weasleys, all rolling around in the mud together, laughed Damien, looking at his younger brother. Come to think of it, next to you, you have a mudblood too. Willem reached out his arm and hit Hermione behind. Don't mess with her, your target is me. Let's keep the foreigners away from home business. Do you think that's wise, brother? Tisk. Jessica laughed lightly. Apparently little William learned to stand up for himself. Maybe he really was a Gryffindor after all. Sadly your mates don't feel the same way. A Rosier within the Gryffindor, they must feel the story will end the same as with Sirius Black. William's expression didn't change even with his brother's comments. He really didn't care what they said. Hermione, on the other hand, was looking at William as if he was a stray dog in the rain. Still, it is our duty to congratulate you for getting into Hogwarts. No one had hopes for a squib like you, but you made it anyway. You even challenged your professor to a duel. Mother will be pleased when you come home. Both siblings laughed sinisterly and continued on their way, leaving William next to Hermione in the free corridor. Come on, we have to get there before curfew, William said, walking as if nothing had happened. His expression didn't change at all, but Hermione could notice the glint in his eyes, an uncontrollable anger that was caught in the white-haired man's stony face. Chapter 23, Plans begin. When the duo returned to the common room, the whole atmosphere was full of laughter and conversations. Even Hermione was friends with some girls and some students, but William on the contrary just walked towards the dormitories without talking to anyone. Everyone was moving around, avoiding running into the white-haired boy. Then Hermione remembered what William's brothers said. Hermione took a step forward to talk to William, but he had already disappeared as if there was no one around, basically a lone lion. Hermione, were you with Rosier? Asked Ron, coming up next to Harry. Yes, replied the girl dryly. He was teaching me in the library. A Rosier teaching a Muggle-born girl? Asked Percy, surprised, who had heard Hermione's words. The world is changing. Hermione, are you sure he didn't hex you or cast a curse on you? Asked Ron, concerned, looking at his friend closely. You can't trust a Rosier, even if he appears to have good intentions. In the end he's just a Slytherin at heart. Everyone knows that. The surrounding students nodded at what Ron said. Don't be fooled, Hermione, the Rosiers are good with words. Everyone in the magical world knows it. Percy put his hand on his shoulder, delivering a piece of advice to Hermione. I was fooled by his older sister, Leslie Rosier. And my brother Bill was fooled by Abby Rosier. My father Arthur was also fooled by Evan Rosier, William's father. In short, don't trust the Rosiers, they are even more treacherous than the Malfoys. Hermione didn't want to believe the words of her companions, but all the elders had similar testimonies. Even if she wanted to defend William, it seemed impossible considering the reputation of William's brothers. She finally fell silent and let everyone follow her comments, but those boys didn't know that William was listening on the second floor. I don't think you are a bad person, William. You helped me find my toad Trevor and you stopped the canes from falling on me on the first day, Neville said from one of the beds near William, making William smile, almost amused. Thank you, Neville, it means a lot to me. Anytime that innocent little boy spoke the truth always, and even when he seemed to be weaker than the others, in the end he was the bravest of them all. The next morning William got out of bed early in the morning, did some exercise and took a shower, nothing out of the routine. Breakfast in the great dining room awaited him, and thanks to his simple spells he managed to transform milk into coffee. Not that he despised milk, but coffee was his true companion in a lifetime, so why not twice? That day William could feel the gaze of the students on him, but they were different from the usual ones, that is to say, they were not friendly but they were weird, as if they were talking behind his back. Hermione, who was far away on the other side of the table, knew what happened and why everyone was talking about William. I mean, all of Hogwarts knows about the comment except William himself, who has no contact with anyone. "How can you talk about William like that?" asked Hermione, looking around at everyone around her. "It's complete hypocrisy on behalf of our house of studies." "Are you blind, Hermione?" asked Ron, hearing his classmates' comments. "William fought Quirrell hand-to-hand in a spell we were beginning to study. It's obvious he used dark magic to win the duel. It's obvious, after all he is a wizard of the Rosier family." "Can't a Rosier be good?" asked Hermione, looking at her two companions. "I don't know much about William, but I do know for sure that the use of dark magic is simply a lie, a deception. William uses ordinary magic, the fact is he mixes Muggle research with magic." "Do you have evidence to prove what he says is true?" asked Ron. "The three of us witnessed how he finished off the troll. No Wingardium Leviosa is capable of doing that. Even for Professor Flitwick it is impossible to recreate the spell." "They're just different perspectives," Hermione muttered, watching William in the distance. Classes continued as normal. In Potions class it was Professor Severus Snape who praised William when he successfully prepared the position he had earlier pointed out to Cho Chang in the library. Obviously Snape was not happy with the fact that he was a Gryffindor. In the defense against the dark arts classes there was not a single comment regarding the previous duel. Quirrell did not bother William and the latter did not make any risky moves. His chance to unmask Voldemort was gone. Trying again would only be tempting fate. William still had doubts about the things he might do in the future. Considering he was part of the Rosier family, it was inevitable that he would be part of Voldemort's little ruse in the future, at least if he did nothing. He had two options in mind: join the Order of the Phoenix or escape to the other side of the world and wait until the storm passes. The last option was really tempting, but William wanted to keep practicing magic and learn a lot more. He was slowly getting hungrier for knowledge. Running away was not an option, and joining the Order of the Phoenix would be ridiculous with his identity. He had only one option left: becoming strong by his own means, but it seemed unrealistic considering his chances. He had to identify a better plan while advancing the plot of the original story. Chapter 24, Pruna. Christmas break was just around the corner. Students were getting ready to leave school to go home. Snow was falling from the sky, covering the ground, and smiles were everywhere. All Hogwarts was being decorated for the holidays, and students were waiting to receive their presents. Many students decided to go home to celebrate the holidays. Of course that was not the case for William, who did not want to see his family. After his little interaction with his siblings, he knew that he did not have to go near home. Things would not go in a good direction for him. The wisest decision was to stay near the library where no one would bother him, or else study the Griffin egg next to Hagrid. "Is this a dragon egg?" asked William, looking at that oval golden-colored object on the table. There was still no apparent reaction to herald its hatching, but with the stories of his old world, William had high expectations. "Of course it's a dragon egg. This one is one category above your Griffin. It will be much harder to raise, but I know with love it will be a good dragon." Hagrid laughed out loud as he tightened his belly. "How did you come by this egg?" "One day not long ago I was playing cards with a stranger in the Hogshead. Maybe I drank a little mead. Well, maybe a little is too unrealistic an estimate, but the truth is I wasn't drunk yet. I won the egg from him fair and square and agreed to help him with his research on the three-headed dogs. It's unusual to see them and I just happened to have trained one." Hagrid told his story to William as he adjusted a pair of gloves on his hands. "It's still early to hatch, but I learned a method that will help you with your Griffin." "A new method?" "No, it's not that new, it's just something that isn't written about much in books. You know, in books they usually use the more difficult methods," Hagrid said with a somewhat nervous smile as he took the egg from the Griffin and placed it inside a metal bucket and set it over the slow fire in the fireplace. "You don't have to be afraid. I used special wood to make the eggs hatch faster." Both boy and half-giant chatted at length about magical creatures and breeding methods. William even made a list of all Hagrid's advice. No one else knew, but when it came to breeding dangerous magical species, Hagrid deserves a medal with honors. Crack! The sound caught the attention of both inside the hut. Hagrid used the gloves to take the egg out of the bucket and placed it on the table. the egg began to wobble and the shell soon cracked. "Here it is," Hagrid said excitedly, then pushed William so that he was in front of the egg. "You are his father, you have to be present, it has to be the first thing he sees." William on one hand wanted to laugh at Hagrid's comment, but he knew it was true what he said. It is important that he is present so that the affectionate relationship between wizard and magical creature starts in positive points. "Hello, little one." William extended his finger towards the little griffin, who could barely blink. His body was covered in fluids, he had some fluff on his body, but that was all. After all, he was still a newborn. "Isn't it beautiful, William?" asked Hagrid with an expression full of tenderness. "Magical creatures are truly beautiful. To see one of these creatures being born is an experience that few can appreciate. I'm really glad to have you here with me." "I am grateful for your help, Hagrid. I really couldn't have pulled this off without your help. Perhaps this little one would never have been born if it wasn't for you." Hagrid shook his head at William's comment. "That's not true. With your intelligence you would have solved this somehow. There is a lot of distance between theory and practice. Maybe the information is in the books, but I can't always execute it correctly. I would like to do it, of course, but that doesn't mean I am a genius. That's why I am grateful. You helped me with my problem, even knowing who my relatives are." William extended his arm towards Hagrid with his hand wide open. "Thank you very much." Considering the half-giant's temperament, he couldn't hold back his tears and shook hands with Hagrid. "What's the name going to be?" "The name?" "Yes, the name for the little griffin." "Ah, I hadn't really thought about it until just now." William stroked his chin, thinking of a name for his little friend. As he thought, he noticed among Hagrid's things there were several jars. Among one in particular there were small fruits: plum jam, plum, tree, prune. "Prune? Prune?" asked Hagrid, intrigued, looking at the small pure-blood wizard. "Yes, her name will be Pruna," said William contentedly, causing Hagrid's eyebrows to rise, mingling with a forced smile. "William, you're not very good with names." Chapter 25, Chapter 25, The Warning to a Friend. With the griffin out of its shell, William had one less worry and one more friend, two friends counting Hagrid, who now had no apparent prejudice towards William because of his ancestry. "Hagrid, do you know about Cerberus and the legend of the three-headed dogs?" asked William as he fed the little griffin. "The legend among the Muggle and the dog said to guard the gates of hell in the mythology of the Greeks?" asked Hagrid to confirm his assumptions. When he saw William nod, then he was quiet. "Three-headed dogs are a rare species, somewhat difficult to care for and even more difficult to tame, but as I told you before, I've done it before." Hagrid set 2 cups of tea on the table, handing one over to William. "That's exactly the problem." "What problem?" "How many three-headed dogs are known in the world?" Hagrid looked at the ceiling as he thought. "I think a few thousand, or maybe a little less. The truth is, it's very hard to find one outside of Greece. If you want to have one, I could guide you, but it's impossible to get a puppy. Even the one I bred is not 100% my own. Bearing in mind that the dog you bred is at Hogwarts and these same ones are mainly used to guard treasures, then at Hogwarts we have a tempting treasure. If we place things in order, then there is only a range of possibilities, among them the Sword of Godric Gryffindor and the Philosopher's Stone. The latter is a more viable option." William seemed to be rambling and placing things in order as if it were a jigsaw puzzle. To Hagrid, William's words were like arrows. He didn't have to say the things he kept secret, but it was hard to keep silent when everything was being uncovered in front of him. "It has to be Godric Gryffindor's sword," exclaimed Hagrid in despair, causing his teacup to pour on the table. "Then it's the Philosopher's Stone." Hagrid sighed wearily. "Why the stone?" "There are a few reasons. Headmaster Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel have been good friends for many years. They both know about the Philosopher's Stone and its value. The camera they stole from Gringotts was part of Dumbledore's belongings, but there is one thing I'm still not clear on." "What could it be that's not in your scheme?" asked Hagrid, giving up on hiding the secret. William didn't seem to have bad intentions, and besides he was just throwing guesses in the air. "The identity of the thief. Anyone wants to have eternal life. You'd be surprised how many wizards want immortality, but here at Hogwarts no thief will be able to get in. Dumbledore, the strongest wizard of all, is at the school. No one would dare go against him." Hagrid spoke with blind confidence, and it was grounded, but in William's mind that was ridiculous. "You're right, Hagrid, but I'm still a little unsure about the situation. Headmaster Dumbledore is the wisest and strongest wizard around that I can't argue with, but the fact that you were asked about the three-headed dog worries me." William was honest. He knew about the plot but he couldn't reveal everything from the start. Hagrid had another tea ready on his table to make up for the one he threw on the floor earlier. "I was just a gambling traveler with some treasures. Eggs aren't easy to come by, no one would give it away to a drunk. Your gambling friend knew about your fascination towards dragons and used it to know everything about your dog. Basically he tricked you." William carefully explained what happened so Hagrid would begin to understand the seriousness of the matter. "The only people who can know about your love towards dragons must be in the castle. There are a lot of suspects, either students or teachers, every single one of them is a suspect." "Galloping gargoyles!" exclaimed Hagrid, placing his hand on his forehead, nervous of the situation. "But I don't talk to students much. Jacob's brother was an exception, but he is no longer at Hogwarts. Then there are only professors left. You'll have a lot of doubts about that, but my guess falls on Professor Quirrell from the Defense Against the Dark Arts class." "Professor Quirrell?" asked Hagrid in surprise. "Impossible, it can't be Professor Quirrell. You saw him yourself barely, and he can barely complete a sentence without biting his tongue. I really can't think of a professor. He can't be a professor. I really doubt an insider." William guessed before starting the conversation. It would be hard to convince Hagrid. A lifetime in the castle and enormous gratitude towards Dumbledore had made him blind. He couldn't doubt the professors. To him everything William said were simply tales from a childish head. "You may be right," said William, finishing drinking his tea. "I just should have been paranoid about it. It's obvious that as long as Dumbledore is at the academy nothing untoward could happen." William gave up on persuading Hagrid. There was no point in continuing with this play. Pretending to be a clever boy tying all the loose ends together is exhausting. After finishing his cup of tea, William decided to go back to the castle. It was not yet dark, but there was not much to do in the hut. When he got to the door he turned slightly and looked at the giant. "Don't let the students come at night. You can't let them see the dragon egg if you want to keep it. That includes Harry and his friend, who will spread the information all over the castle. I don't have to explain what will happen to the dragon if the professors ever find out." Dropping his words, William left the hut, heading for the castle to go to the library. Chapter 26, Chapter 26, Christmas. Christmas finally arrived at Hogwarts. It wasn't just around the corner, it was in the castle. The few remaining students in each of the houses went straight for their Christmas trees. William was already aware of the gifts from the other Gryffindor students. Still, he got up from his bed, heading towards the dining hall. If his family had sent him any gifts he really didn't care. They wouldn't be any better than the gifts from the other students due to his current condition. William even went so far as to wish for a sweater knitted by Mrs. Weasley to cover himself from the winter cold. As soon as William came down the stairs he noticed the children sitting by the presents. As expected, Harry had the wooden flute made by Hagrid in his hand, while Ron was fascinated with the 50-pence coin. William gave one last yawn as he stretched his body to leave the common room when he was held up from his shirt collar. "Stop," said one of the redheads, the Gryffindor house prefect, as he handed 3 parcels into William's hands. "I don't think it's a good idea to leave without opening your presents." Percy stood with his own half-opened presents. Under his arm was a sweater, but he didn't seem to feel like opening them. "Speaking of bad ideas, I think it's best not to waste your mother's efforts on your unwarranted embarrassment. Wear the sweater, it may be the last one you can wear." William took the first gift and opened it. Percy, who had been left behind, looked at William's back. He wanted to say something but silenced him. Instead he looked at the sweater closely and the word P. His mother's affection could be glimpsed. He looked to the side and put it on his body. William's first gift was a hairbrush. It was obviously from Hagrid and was sent mainly by Pruna, but the Griffin was still too small to brush it, maybe in a few months or a year. The second gift was a letter. The sender was Abby Rosier, William's mother. Seeing the return address label, the white-haired man was startled but restrained his voice. He wasn't afraid of his mother, but for anyone it was hard to see words of reproach. As he opened the letter he realized that his ideas were only a matter of his mind and the reality was much simpler. The letter was blank. There was nothing written on the letter. William looked at the back and even thought that with a revealing spell he could see the contents, but if they wanted to say something they would not use a code. William crumpled the letter and ejected it into the fire to burn completely. In William's hands rested one last gift. It was not small but not huge either. This time the sender of the letter was Lord Rosier, William's grandfather. That was a surprise for young William, but he was quite curious about the gift. When he opened the package he found a book, a necklace, and a note. William the First, know this is unexpected. Everything that is happening to you are things that are not in your power, and I don't blame. Instead, your mother seems to have the idea that you betray the family. Your father would have had the same idea, but it is not so in my case. I am an old man with a bit of wisdom. The hat selects you depending on your abilities, and being in Gryffindor means you are brave. These gifts are to protect you. The necklace is an object that is passed down in our family and has many protective charms that will keep you alive. Your father never wore it with him. The book contains incantations to make you invisible. It is important that you learn them to keep you away from your siblings. They are blind to their mother's words. P.S. In the eyes of the lions you are still a snake. Trust no one and stand firm in the face of all adversity. William was stunned at the enclosed note. He did not expect a similar surprise coming from his grandfather, whom everyone feared. With his right hand he lifted the necklace to see the small emblem it bore, a small silver cross with a star at each end. Instead, the book looked a little more worn than the ones he took from the family library, possibly one of the books William overlooked. The title of the book seemed simple: Arts to Conceal Presence. There was nothing very special about the title, one had to admit, and even its author seemed simple, just the initials DLF. Each of the pages of the book was yellow and the writing was elegant. William had already read several books in the library, but he had not seen such elegant calligraphy before. It was written in a clean hand, so it could be said that it was an original book of the author, simply an outstanding object, but with the antiquity it could be a treasure. Even so, Lord Rosier sent it casually with an owl. The tables of the great dining room were full of food, even though there were no more than 20% of the students in the castle. At this moment William was calmer, since he had much more space to sit and eat in peace. Besides, all his brothers had returned home. Another good news for the white-haired boy. Now, without interruptions, he could start with his reading of the book sent by his grandfather. Some students noticed William's actions and shook their heads, but the teachers were intrigued to see the old book, even more so Dumbledore, but without showing it on his face. Chapter 27, Chapter 27, Fresh Ideas for a Dry Brain. The winter vacations were over. William had spent the days with his training in the arts of concealment. The book sent by Lord Rosier was complicated. It had a lot of very unorthodox and ancient words. The system in his head could only react slightly to the incantations by placing them with a 1 or 2% understanding, basically nothing, but William was happy to see some progress. William's own research on the Philosopher's Stone was not important to the white-haired man. At one time he had an interest in having it to use as an augmenter for his spells, but it would be difficult to escape Dumbledore's eyes with the stone. Saving Nicholas Flamel's life was also out of the question. Once Professor Quirrell's secret was discovered, the decision to destroy the stone would be made anyway. William's goal was not the Philosopher's Stone or Nicholas Flamel himself. He would have liked to succeed in all his work, but what he sought was to know all about magic, to explore the world and learn as much as possible. He did not want to face Voldemort, but he would be ready if necessary, and it would be necessary for his plans. The truth was that he would face any dark wizard that stood in his way. For now he would study at Hogwarts as planned for the 7 years. He would learn as much as he could. That included magical creatures, as was the case with Pruna, the griffin he got earlier. Under the intense pace of learning and the constant walls in his learning, William sought some clean air. Outside the library, he did not choose to go with Hagrid, as he wanted to rest. He stretched out on the grass and looked at the sky. What do I do now? He asked himself out loud. In William's mind were all the events of the first installment of the Harry Potter story. He had to win against Quirrell if he wanted to advance his plans, but it seemed impossible. Facing a teacher at school was outrageous, plus it would be the second time the two would face each other. It would draw too much attention. Influence in the school was necessary. Right now, in the eyes of the professors, he was no different than his brothers or Malfoy. If he wanted to make a selfish request to Dumbledore, he had to earn the credit, and the only way right now was to help in the case of the Philosopher's Stone. Between his thoughts and his only visible figure from the sky, William could see a familiar face in front of him. Did the books bore you? No, I was just taking a break to swallow all the information. William stood up to look at Cho Chang in front of him. It was a surprise to see you out of the library and stretched out on the lawn. I thought there was something wrong. No, nothing wrong with me, William mumbled, craning his neck slightly. As I said, I was digesting information and sorting out some doubts. Cho's attention was focused on the old book at William's side. I have never seen this book before. It's a gift from my grandfather, William answered casually. It's an old book, but it's impossible for a girl like her to understand its content. Maybe more experienced witches could do it casually, but in this case it's impossible. Cho Chang had opened the book to see inside. She maybe hadn't noticed, but she was sitting next to William. The white-haired boy didn't mind, since in the 21st century that was normal, but for Hogwarts students it wasn't the same. For many, to see William the little morph wizard next to Cho Chang was scandalous. It is very difficult to understand. There are many words that are not used today, and when it talks about potions it mentions ingredients that do not exist or cannot be found. Are you sure it is an authentic book? Asked Cho Chang, pointing to a specific paragraph. Here it mentions that the tears of the centaurs and the blood of a dragon are ingredients for a potion that changes the sex of a person. I don't really have any information about this book. My grandfather sent it to me during Christmas and it doesn't seem to have been opened for many years, William told Cho Chang. He mentioned that I could find spells to become invisible, but many of these spells are hard to learn, or I don't have the amount of magic needed to use them. It's useless to have them if I can't use them. I wish I had a way to use strong spells with my current magic. William gave a slight sigh, closing his eyes and dropping his back to the grass again. What if you use the spells on a smaller scale? Asked Cho Chang with a vague idea. You told me about potions before, and you also talked about enchantments with me. Your ideas propose Muggle solutions, and I lived among Muggles, so I have a bit of experience. What is your idea? Asked William curiously, but formulating his own idea in his mind. The flames on a stove, mentioned Cho Chang. On a gas stove you can choose which amount of gas you use for cooking by making the flame smaller or larger as the case may be, so wouldn't it be possible to do the same with magic? William's eyes widened. Use magic on a smaller scale, William muttered under his breath. The Wingardium Leviosa of an inexperienced wizard can lift feathers, and the more skilled, heavier objects. With the necessary understanding, heavier objects and living objects can be lifted. I just have to understand the spell to the point of using it with less power. William stood up in one fell swoop. Thank you, Cho, exclaimed the white-haired man, exalted, hugging the surprised Cho. Without giving her time to respond or reciprocate the hug, William took off, running towards the library again. I'm glad I could help you, said Cho Chang, looking at William's back. Chapter 28, Chapter 28, Magic is a Tool. As soon as William returned to the castle he stopped. His route was in the direction of the library, but he remembered that he had more treasures than all the other students in his trunk. He ran down the corridors to the common room, where everyone stared at him after his abrupt entrance, but William didn't give them a single glance. He just kept running towards the dormitories. There he opened the trunk and picked up the books he had taken from the Rosier Manor library. Here it is, murmured William, holding in his hands the book of ancient spells and charms fallen into oblivion. He quickly opened the book and went through the pages until he found what he needed. This is it, one of the most powerful spells for both protection and attack, Protego Diabolica. Again William looked all around to make sure no one was looking at him. Enough with all that stuff about the little Death Eater. Now that he was on his way to understanding a dark enchantment, everyone would label him a dark wizard. Of course, to William's mind, the ignorant are the ones who judge people without a valid argument. A knife can be considered both a weapon and a tool. If it is wielded by a cook, then it is a tool and is viewed positively, but if the person using it is a serial killer, then it becomes a murder weapon. The case of dark magic is similar. If it is used by a white wizard for good purposes, then it is taken as a saving charm, but if a Death Eater uses dark magic to murder, then it is evil magic. In William's eyes, a wizard should not be judged by the magic he knows, but by the use he makes of the magic. Any spell or enchantment is dangerous if not used in the right way. The case of Protego Diabolica is the same, a protective enchantment that burns enemies and protects allies depending on the mind of the user. It is the perfect enchantment to protect Hogwarts, but in the eyes of experienced wizards it is a dark protective enchantment. William's hands ran through the pages of the book with the dark enchantment. a total of 40 pages dedicated to this enchantment, demonstrating with evidence how complicated it would become to use. There is no way William would finish learning it by the end of the year, even using the system. The system itself does not increase his power, it just shows how much understanding William has for a specific spell or incantation. William again focused his attention on the book and began to read slowly as he used his quill to make notes on the side. Time passed, the sun was streaking across the sky, classes were progressing, students were returning to the common room. Many students were surprised to see William on his bed with his legs crossed with several sheets around him, but decided not to make a big deal of it and walked away as usual. The stars filled the sky, the candles were extinguished. William continued studying while making use of his mind's eye until when fatigue made him fall asleep. The following days continued at the same pace, with the only change in William's routine being to be at Hagrid's hut to see Pruna. The griffin's growth was also rapid. It only took him 2 weeks to have his body full of feathers, and even if he couldn't fly, at least he could walk. It was worth mentioning that Hagrid was thrilled with all the progress Pruna made. After visiting Pruna and dropping him off at the hut, William headed to the dining room to eat and recover his energy. The students were already beginning to be surprised to see William always carrying sheets of paper in his pockets and eating large amounts of food without putting on any weight. The flying classes were a little different. Since the last race, William didn't make any more effort to compete. He had no interest in excelling in a broom flying class. The most important thing was the research of the Protego Diabolica enchantment. William was running into more and more walls in his learning of enchantment. He had read the pages, researched the history of the creator, looked up references in other books, but there were no results for his growth. His understanding of enchantment was not increasing from 4%. While William was wallowing in his nightly research in the library, looking for some enlightenment in the upperclassmen's protective enchantment books, outside the castle, in Hagrid's hut, a different kind of talk was going on. "This is unbelievable, you guys suspect Professor Snape and William is suspecting Professor Quirrell," Hagrid exclaimed, somewhat elated as he listened to the conspiracy theories of the Golden Trio sitting on the couch in front of the half-giant. "William?" asked Harry. "Was he here?" "What if William was here?" asked Hagrid, looking at the trio of students. "Of course he was here. He's here at least 4 or 5 times a week. He visits me more than you 3. "That's impossible. A Rosier would never come to your hut," Ron interrupted. "He's been coming since before Christmas. I even gave him a Christmas present and he gave me a Dragon Care manual." Hagrid held up a red book with silver decorations that he had on a shelf. "He also came with an idea like yours, but he came with the assumption that he was Quirrell and you come with the name Snape. You should stop distrusting professors. They are trying to protect the stone, not steal it." "Hagrid, you should be careful of William. He's not a good wizard," said Ron. "Ron!" exclaimed Hermione to look at the red-headed boy next to her. "What?" asked Ron, holding up his hands. "I'm just telling the truth. I'm warning Hagrid so he doesn't get in trouble." The Rosiers always had a reputation for being dark wizards, even before Who You Know came along. William's family has a reputation among wizards, even pure-bloods, but William is different, or so I want to believe. You guys should give him a chance too. Hagrid looked at the trio and more at Harry, but Harry just lowered his head. It was at that moment that Hagrid noticed the dragon egg being shaken into a bucket over the fire. "Here it comes." Content, Hagrid lifted the golden egg and placed it on the table. It had cracks in the shell. Something was moving inside. A curious noise was coming from inside it. Finally the egg cracked open, revealing the little dragon. It had the appearance of a wrinkled black pirougas, huge pointed wings, a skinny body, long snout with wide nostrils, a pair of spikes corresponding to the hides protruding slightly, and the eyes were orange and bulging. "Isn't he precious?" murmured Hagrid, captivated, reaching out a hand to stroke the dragon's head, who gave him a tarascon, showing his pointed fangs. "Look, he already recognizes his mom." The trio was focused on the dragon and Hagrid. They still couldn't understand how it was possible that Hagrid found him cute, but they didn't want to comment on it. If William had been here he would have wanted to carry him in his arms, I'm sure. "Hold him?" asked Hermione. "Sure, he has Pruna the Griffin," mentioned Hagrid, snapping his mouth shut. "He shouldn't have said that." "A griffin?" exclaimed Ron. "Can I see it?" Hagrid shook his head. This week he carries it with him everywhere he goes in his bag. He has food there and everything he needs for Pruna. William really loves that griffin and I'm not surprised, it's his only friend. Hagrid. Hermione called. How long do Norwegian ridgebacks take to grow? Hagrid was about to answer the question when all of a sudden his face paled. He jumped to his feet and ran to the window. What's going on? Asked Harry. Someone was peering through a crack in the curtain. It was a boy. He's running back to school. They all went to the door to see who it was and the silhouette of it was unmistakable. They all knew who it was. Malfoy, muttered Harry. Chapter 29, Chapter 29, Norberta. Hagrid, is this your dragon? Asked William, entering the hut on the outskirts of the castle. William greeted Hagrid happily as he struggled to get close to the little dragon without it biting him. This is Norberto, he's a Norwegian ridgeback. Norberta, interrupted William. What? It's female, so it's a Norberta. It's incorrect to call it Norberto because it's not a male, explained William calmly, making Hagrid much more surprised. Oh, said Hagrid lightly as he walked away. Now I understand why it didn't work out. William nodded his head as in his arms rested the griffin, who now had feathering all over his body. It was still early for Pruna to fly and she seemed quite attached to William, to the point that she didn't bite him but rather slept quietly. I guess his temperament is quite strong and it's all due to the methods you were using. I noticed Hagrid seemed to have lost his appetite as he looked at Norberta. I appreciate you showing up, otherwise it would have ended up making Norberta even more enraged. William delivered into Hagrid's arms Pruna, who quickly woke up but made no sudden movements except to follow the white-haired man's movements with her eyes. Norberta was biting some of the leather jackets that Hagrid had in his dressing room. For the little dragon, the existence of William was almost invisible except for the aroma that reached her nostrils. When she turned her head in the direction of the aroma, she could notice it a fresh fish, or well, that was what Norberta believed. The reality was that it was only processed food with fish flavor. Norberta's venomous fangs embedded into the food, shredding the small lump of food like it was nothing. It was several bites, but soon she was hungry for more food and William had no problem handing her food. You got it, William. Norberta is eating quietly, said Hagrid happily. Hagrid's dream had always been to raise a dragon and this was his chance. He had studied books from the library and had asked his acquaintances through Owl's methods of taming a dragon. He employed every single piece of advice on Norberta but nothing seemed to please him, and the answer was so clear that he overlooked it himself. Norberta's sex was the problem and William knew it at a glance. But the time to check that everything was going as it should was at another time. William held out his arm while Norberta ate. The acid test was there. William had to put his hand on Norberta and caress her without her biting him with her venomous fangs. Careful, William, Hagrid warned quietly as he held Pruna tighter. He was obviously worried. He himself didn't have the confidence to approach Norberta like this without being bitten. William's hand came closer. Norberta was now looking at William's hand. Her eyes were fixed on the white fur, ready to strike at any moment. Soon William's hand was only inches away and the dragon had done nothing. Hagrid was more nervous than William. Finally William's hand was on Norberta's head without her biting him. Sighed William, letting out all the air that had built up in his lungs. He did it, said Hagrid, surprised. He did it, he exclaimed happily, looking at Pruna. William managed to communicate with Norberta successfully. She is not dangerous, we can train her, she won't have to leave Hogwarts, she might even become the protective beast of the castle's skies. Yes, Professor Dumbledore will agree with my suggestion. That was William's first experience with a dragon and he could already classify it as successful. Both William and Hagrid were happy with what happened and they had their reasons after all. They both spent quite some time writing down everything they knew about dragons. William had even brought Hagrid an encyclopedia of dragons and known breeding methods. Needless to say how pleased Hagrid was with the gift. As the sun was falling and the shadows threatened to take over the sky, it was time for William to return to the castle. Hagrid had encouraged him to stay out of trouble with Filch, but William himself was not afraid of the janitor. After all, he had the mind's eye to know everything around him. There was no way Filch, Mrs. Morris, or Peeves would catch him. He had evaded them so many times since he began his studies at Hogwarts that he even knew their routines. The corridors that night were unoccupied. There were no ghosts nearby. There were no professors, students, or trolls. it was basically just William walking down the corridor. There was no need for lanterns at all, the mind's eye was the only support he needed. It was during his walk that he encountered a different silhouette than usual. Potter, William muttered. Hey! Harry looked to his side, he saw William staring in his direction. He was sure he couldn't see him after all, he was hidden under the invisibility cloak, but he heard how William had called him Ron. I know, I heard it too, the redhead said fearfully. He shouldn't be able to see us. William soon realized that their auras were different than normal. By deactivating his mind's eye he could realize why. Both Ron Weasley and Harry Potter were under the invisibility cloak. No one should be able to see them, but William's mind's eye could see them perfectly. Both boys kept walking, thinking that it had been their imagination that William had seen them, as the white-haired boy was static, but the reality was different. William was surprised that he could see through the invisibility cloak. That meant that his power was greater than the death relics, or well, a little more special in a way. Chapter 30, The Ideal Habitat. During the following days William returned to his routine. He spent the days in the library between classes learning and trying to understand the spells in a more proactive way. Of course there was a difference from the previous situation. Cho Chang now frequented to be near William and was always asking about some subjects. When Cho Chang was not with William, it was Hermione who arrived with questions. According to William's own observations, she was studying Muggle theories with books that her parents sent her. Now she had double ration of study, which also turned into an accumulation of spent energy. In addition to practicing spells and incantations, William had his own potions practice. He attended supplementary classes and asked permission to use the potions classroom. Of course Severus always had some kind of comment towards William, but as he was not Potter, then there would be no problems. The afternoons were to visit Hagrid. Pruna had a normal growth and William followed the instruction books for her upbringing to the letter. On the other hand, Norberta had an exponential growth. In just 1 month she could barely fall inside the hut, and it was urgent to move her before she was discovered. Norberta was now a tame and calm dragon as long as she had her food. Of course William and Hagrid were worried about having some prize for the dragon to be calm. What do we do, William? Asked Hagrid, looking at Norberta, who could barely move inside the hut. The teachers will discover her at any moment. Ron and Harry recommended me to send her to Romania with her brother Charlie, but I don't want to be separated from Norberta. She is as harmless as a cat. Hagrid's mood was horrible, and not for less. After all, they were taking away the thing he wanted most in the world. It was basically the equivalent of taking a video game console from a small child. William stood silently with his arms crossed, thinking of a solution. Pruna was soon satisfied and moved towards William, biting one of his fingers. Okay, good, I get it, said William, pulling out a small bag from between his robes and placing it near Pruna so that Pruna could enter calmly. That's it, exclaimed Hagrid, seeing what William was doing. Pruna, the griffin, and your bag. I hadn't thought of it before, but it's an excellent idea. A bag to hold Norberta? Asked William, taking the bag where Pruna was. Yes, I think it should be able to drop, but we have to do a bit of work first. What do we have to do? Asked Hagrid excitedly. William took out one of the bags that were sent by the betting house elves with the prize coins. The bags were empty, as the prize was deposited in other bags inside the trunk in the Gryffindor dormitories. Once the bag was in Hagrid's hands, he had Hagrid open it enough so that they could both look inside. These bags were enchanted with capacious extremis to increase their size as much as possible to make the prizes fit. Of course the space inside is too much for the galleons that were delivered into my possession. As I didn't have to return the bags, I am using them to transport my belongings, and another bag is used as Pruna's habitat while she learns to fly. William explained the properties of the bag enough for Hagrid to understand. The inside of this bag is empty, so we will have to adapt it so that Norberta can live inside. We have to do enough to create a lake inside where she can hunt and eat as if she was in the wild. Hagrid wrote down everything William was saying. He himself was a connoisseur of magical creatures, but having William's advice also helped. For the half-giant to have a friend to help him was what he had always wanted. Working in Norberta's habitat was specifically not a simple thing, that is to say, they had to make everything as natural as possible so that Norberta would not try to escape from unforeseen events. The effort of the duo was immense. Even with simple spells and incantations they had to work quite physically. By the time the bag was ready, it was late at night. "That's it," William said with his hands on his hips. He had taken off his shirt and jackets some time ago. He was only wearing his shirt with the sleeves folded up to his elbows. His clothes were dirty all over and even his hair had dirt in it. Hagrid was no more elegant, it was clear, but unlike William the Hogwarts Ranger was soaked, and it was because his task was focused on the Habitat Lake for Norberta. Hagrid had to catch fish and look for everything he needed to create an artificial lake. "We have to get Norberta into the bag." Hagrid looked at the dragon who was resting in the hut with her eyes closed. "Did you bring what I asked for?" asked William. Hagrid handed over in his hands a fish bigger than the white-haired swordfish. He muttered with a smile, approaching Norberta. The dragon's eyes opened out of nowhere as she smelled the scent of the fish. "Do you want the fish?" asked William, looking at the dragon as he put the head of the swordfish inside the bag. Norberta slowly stood up, hitting her head against the roof of the hut and making several things fall to the floor. William approached with the bag in his hand. "Norberta was only inches away from the fish." "Come and get it," said William, releasing the swordfish into the bag, an action that was repeated by Norberta. The dragoness rushed forward and dove into the bag, immediately emptying the hut. "Ready!" exclaimed William, happily holding the bag in his hand. "Everything is ready now. Norberta will be able to grow and live quietly inside the bag until we find a place to keep her properly." "Thank you, William. Again I owe you a lot," said Hagrid, patting William's back, "but I think it's too late now. You should get back to the castle before the professors know you're not in the dormitories." Chapter 31, Chapter 31, Tests. The year was coming to an end and the exams were near. One of the concerns that was certainly less important for William, either because he had complete knowledge of all the first-year subjects and some of the second-year and even a little of the third-year books, or well, it could be because for his attention the most important thing was Pruna and Norberta. Because of the danger to Norberta after being exposed to Malfoy, Hagrid decided that it was best for William to carry her around his waist for a while, until at least the situation was secure and there was no danger of her being sent away. "What are you going to do during the vacations, William?" asked Cho Chang, who was sitting across from William, and next to him was Marietta Edgecombe. The trio had several books on the table with many sheets full of notes. In truth, it was William who was teaching the two girls. "I have plans for the whole vacation," William mentioned with a bored tone as he jotted down some details about potions on his sheets. "I see you have everything planned out. You really are a very organized boy." "Are you going on a trip?" asked Marietta, snapping out of her reading to look at the white-haired boy. "Something like that." "Where are you going?" "It's a secret." "Family trip?" "No." "Are you going alone?" "Something like that." "A purification trip?" "You could say it's something like that." "Why don't you tell us the details?" "Cho and I are dying of curiosity." Marietta tugged on William's sleeve as she moved the young man's notes. "Mari!" exclaimed Cho Chang to stop her friend. "William is concentrating, besides it's not polite to interfere in someone else's private life." "But he's our friend, we've known him for several months now." "But that doesn't give you the right to interfere in his life." "But William doesn't care, just look at him. He's not paying attention." Marietta pointed to William, who was simply concentrating on his studies. "Still, you shouldn't interfere. William doesn't mean anything." Cho Chang made it clear to her friend Marietta, who closed her mouth and went back to her studies reluctantly. A few hours later, William was alone in the library. All the students who had been studying had left, but the white-haired man didn't care. He continued studying silently in his corner. The progress of his magics was low. He had some theories about progress, but there was no time to put his theories into practice. He needed to gain the favor of the headmaster for his vacation plans, and he had the ultimate way to achieve it. The days passed and the exams arrived at Hogwarts. The first exam was finally on the table in front of William, but there was nothing to fear. The first exam belonged to Professor Flitwick's incantation class. It basically consists of making a pineapple dance on the professor's desk. Nothing difficult for William, who used the dancing feet charm, Tarrant Legra. The second exam was not part of William's forte. Professor McGonagall's transformations class was not simple. Of course, William was one of the best students, but he himself did not feel satisfied since he had to give double the normal effort. Transforming a mouse into a snuff box was easy. But the third exam was simple, or well, it was perfect, as it was in his end zone. Since William had entered Hogwarts, he had spent over 70% of his free time in the library. His main assignment was to study charms, but before he knew it he was working on potions, and after a short time his area of greatest impact was potions. William could not only understand potions and their properties, but he could also create new formulas. The third exam corresponded to the brewing of the Forgetfulness Potion, one of the first potions in William's repertoire. It did not have many improvements unlike other potions, but he was able to formulate a process to optimize the brewing of the potion. Snape couldn't say anything against William. Most were afraid for not forgetting the process, but the white-haired boy was different. All his exams were perfect. The fourth and last exam was in charge of Professor Cuthbert Binns in the History of Magic class. Questions about the wizard who invented the self-stirring cauldrons. William's time was a record, as if the answers had always been in his mind. It was so fast that Professor Binns had to congratulate William before he left the classroom. For the ghost, it only took one look to know that everything was correct. Finally free, said William, stretching himself slightly happy. There were other exams, but they were also simple. Professor Quirrell's exam was even simpler. The stuttering professor made the simplest exam among all the student branches. Now in William's mind there was only one thing left: Quirrell and Voldemort. He did not want to get into trouble and draw Voldemort's attention, but for his future plans it was necessary to act and help in the rescue of the Philosopher's Stone. Chapter 32, The Protector's Tests. The fact that Dumbledore was not in the castle due to an emergency meeting was the signal for William to begin his work. He relaxed his body, made sure the wand was secured at his waist, and decided to leave his cloak behind to avoid inconvenience. He raised his head to make sure everything was correct, and indeed it was what he expected. Harry and Ron were not in their beds as expected. William got out of bed and walked through the dormitory calmly. The lights off was not a problem with his mind's eye, and when he made it all the way to the common room he could find little Neville lying on the floor. Neville called William, worried. He took out his wand and pointed it at the young boy. Calm down, it will only take a second. By the look on Neville's face he could tell how scared he was. The Golden Trio certainly didn't have the boy's feelings in mind. They believed that because of his behavior this wouldn't be serious, but it may also create a shadow inside the boy for his future. Finite incantatum, said William, sending the general counter-spell enchantment, leaving Neville free from petrification. William, exclaimed Neville in despair, getting up almost suddenly, holding the arms of the white-haired boy. Ha, Harry, Ron and Hermione, they went out again at night. We will lose points again. I couldn't stop them. I tried, I really tried, and I stood up to them, but Hermione paralyzed me. William could feel Neville's desperation. He could see the fear in his eyes. Not because of the stitches in the house, but because of what they were doing at night. After all, Neville also knew about Fluffy, Hagrid's three-headed dog. Easy, Neville, we can work it out, but I have to know where they went. You must have heard something. William calmed Neville down so Neville could breathe again. They went to the third-floor corridor. The third floor, I understand. I'll go get them before McGonagall can find them. Wait for me here. William stood up, ready to leave. William, wait. What's wrong? Asked William, looking at the fearful boy. There's a big three-headed dog. Be careful. Hermione mentioned something about a secret door. I understand. William finally left the common room and walked down the corridors. Soon he was already on the third floor, and in front of him was Fluffy, awake with the trapdoor under his feet open. They already went through here. William used a simple incantation to make the harp in Fluffy's paws play again, and as Fluffy was known to do, Fluffy closed his eyes. A great security system, but with a major flaw. William stepped down the trapdoor, knowing that below is the devil's snare. Lumos, exclaimed William, flashing his wand and taking a full step down. To avoid the impact he grabbed onto a branch before reaching the ground. Okay, 2 obstacles cleared, only 5 to go, but from now on I don't have to do much work. William shook out his clothes and continued to the front. The third test was Professor Flitwick's flying keys. William walked to the door on the other side of the room. The key was in the lock. There wasn't much to do but continue to the front. By the fourth test things were even easier. The chess was finished and Ron was on the floor. William gave the redhead a look. Sigh. The white-haired man gave a long sigh, then pulled out a green-colored potion. I'll have to use this on this idiot to earn some favor points. A waste. William lifted Ron's head and forced him to drink the Wiggenweld potion. Wake up, you idiot, I need you to wake up to earn points. When he finally saw a small reaction in the redhead, he decided to go ahead and enter the fifth room where the dead troll was. Quite a painful death. William mentioned levitating the troll's body to see in detail the damage on the front, giving William to understand what he was facing. He kept the troll's body inside one of his bags. He continued to the front. There were still 2 tests left. He was in front of the door where Severus Snape's test was supposed to be. As soon as he touched the doorknob, it opened in the opposite direction, and from there Hermione appeared, who had taken the potion to back up. "William, what are you doing here?" asked the girl, but William's expression still showed no feelings. It was even colder than usual. "Looking for Gryffindor mates who don't know how to do anything but get others in trouble and attack their mates with curses," said William, pulling out a bottle shaped like a piece of ice from his bag. "We are saving Hogwarts from Snape and Voldemort," said Hermione, but William just laughed in her face. "From Snape?" he asked again. "Don't make me laugh. Snape is not the culprit but Quirrell. Professor Quirrell is an ally." "Sure as you say. I'm going to find Potter. Don't get in my way, they've already done their job," said William, taking the cap off his potion, then drinking it full and dropping the bottle on the floor. "You can't pass. Snape's test only lets one person pass his ward. Harry already drank the potion and the black flames won't let you go any further," warned Hermione with a triumphant pose, as if she had already prevented William from continuing to the front, but he simply opened the door calmly. "Did you really think I wasn't prepared?" asked William with a grin. "These tests are simply game once you know the necessary tricks." William took a firm step to the front. Hermione could watch as he walked through the flames with complete calmness and no fear at all. How? She noticed the bottle on the ground and its shape became familiar. Flame protection potion. "I'll be back in a few minutes, let Dumbledore know." William opened the last door and disappeared into the black flames. Chapter 33, Saving the Day. "Don't be silly." William could hear the horrible and chilling voice. He opened the door slowly and extended his wand to the front, looking for the right moment to act. Inside the room stood Harry in fear, and in front of him stood Quirrell without his turban, leaving Voldemort's hideous face in full view. "You had better save your own life and join me. Or you will meet the same end as your parents, they died begging for mercy," said Voldemort in his chilling voice that made William's body tremble. "Bullshit!" exclaimed Harry out of nowhere, causing Quirrell to flinch. "How touching," mumbled Voldemort. "Always consider bravery." "Yes, my boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first and he fought bravely. But your mother didn't need to die. She was trying to protect you. Now give me that stone, unless you want her to die in vain." "Never!" exclaimed Harry, backing up a few steps. "Get him!" commanded Voldemort, causing Quirrell to pounce on Harry. "Come here, Potter!" exclaimed Quirrell as Harry closed his eyes in fear, but before they could touch, Quirrell was hit by an enchantment, pushing him backwards. "Who's there?" exclaimed the cowardly old professor. William stepped out from the shadows with his wand extended. "Stay away from Potter, Quirrell." William's tone was cold and serious, but his mere presence made everyone startled. "William!" exclaimed Harry. He didn't understand why William was there, but now he could only be thankful in his mind. "Rosier, I really didn't expect you to show up in this place. I guess you also come for the Philosopher's Stone," mentioned Quirrell with a smile on his face. "But you don't need to look for it anymore. Potter has it in his pocket and Voldemort is here. You can help him in his resurrection just like your father would have wanted." "True," nodded William, making Harry's whole body tremble as their gazes met. "I have to talk to him." Voldemort's cold voice gave an order and Quirrell could only obey by turning around. "De Rosier," whispered from the face of the greatest dark wizard of all at present. "William Rosier, I suppose, your use of magic is truly splendid, just like your father in the past." "No, your talent is better than your father's. Evan, I remember, was one of my greatest servants. He chose to fight to the death rather than be captured. As far as I knew, his courage was as great as the Potter parents. Now you can honor his memory. Bring the stone before me, help me bring it back to life as it should, and I assure you that you will be powerful enough to reign as my servant. you will take your father's place and be my disciple. William lifted both shoulders with a normal expression. Sure, I really wouldn't mind being a disciple of a great wizard, if only you had said that I would have accepted it, but talking nice things about my father and thinking I'm like the rest of the Rosiers was a bad argument. I'm not like the rest of my family. I am unique among all wizards. As soon as William was saying his words, Quirrell extended his wand and opened his mouth. Avada Kedavra. Quirrell was ready to send the killing curse and end William's life. He himself considered himself loyal to Voldemort as his master, and listening to a child insult him was a sin, but he didn't count on one small detail. Before he could finish his curse, from the tip of William's wand flew the Flipendo charm. How? Asked Quirrell, getting up after being thrown a few feet away. Simple, smiled William with satisfaction. Seeing Quirrell and Voldemort on the ground gave him a strange feeling of pleasure. My wand has a Thunderbird feather, it protects me in the face of danger, and the rest you should already know. Yes, complained Quirrell, he can send spells to save his master, but he shouldn't be able to select the right spell. For that he must have awareness of his surroundings. It's a dual-core wand. William extended his wand again. Both cores are simple or not so practical, but joined together they are invincible. Thunderbird feather and a fairy core. Certainly not normal, a fairy isn't useful for anything besides decoration. But in this case it saved my life. Quirrell stood up again as if floating. But you'll need a lot more than a 2-core wand to stop me. William craned his neck. I estimated it would be this way, so prepare some countermeasures. William's wand glowed red and purple. Potter, take the stone, warned Snape, bring reinforcements, I'll buy time. But run! William's shout brought back Harry, who gave a loud gulp and ran out of the room, leaving the white-haired man and the professor behind. The stone! Exclaimed Voldemort, causing Quirrell to go on the attack, but William stepped in the way, throwing Flipendo at the enemy. Your enemy is me, said William confidently. You can bet I'll be a tough nut to crack. You won't have time to resurrect before Dumbledore arrives. Voldemort let out a roar full of anger, and Quirrell quickly began the siege against William. The attacks between the two were cross, but William was losing ground with every passing second. Quirrell's experience, spells and power were superior to what a first-year student could learn, but William was calm. He just had to hold on longer, until Dumbledore returns to the castle. A couple of minutes later it was William who was hiding behind a pillar. His breathing was ragged, the magic circulating in his body was minimal. William, you little traitor, Quirrell called angrily. Following Harry was impossible. Every time they tried to leave the room, William would attack from some point. His own mission was to prevent them from following Harry. Flipendo! Exclaimed William as Quirrell was about to leave the room, but Quirrell easily shielded himself and returned a curse that ended up disarming William, sending him far to the ground. Quirrell floated over to where William's body rested on the floor. Rosier, you were brave, I admit, braver than your father and grandfather, but weaker than either of them. I admire your initiative, and so I will use you as my new host. I can fight. William raised his upper body to a sitting position. I can take you out with ease. Yes, asked Voldemort, I would like to see you how you are going to do it. William was calm. He kept his smile full of confidence, taking in his hand a small bag. With this, from the bag came out the big snout and the sharp teeth. Quirrell took a step back, but it was too late. Norberta's fangs were already in the professor's abdomen. Ah! Shouted Quirrell, struggling to get free, raising his arm to invoke a curse. From the other bag came out the little griffin, who was still not flying. Pruna simply ran and leapt to rip Quirrell's hand off. It was impossible for Quirrell to fight Norberta in such a small place. Pruna, on the other hand, was close to William, spreading her wings to protect her master. Rosier! Exclaimed Quirrell, fighting for his life, but it was impossible against the dragoness. Seeing that he was now safe, William closed his eyes and dropped to the ground. Chapter 34, Selfish Request. William groaned as he furrowed his eyebrows. He opened his eyes and quickly recognized the place where he was, the infirmary, just as he had planned. Finally awake, Mr. Rosier! The voice of the elderly headmaster had entered William's ears, causing him to pay attention to him. Headmaster? Asked William. He could still feel the exhaustion in his body, but it was no time to take breaks. He knew that better than anyone inside the castle. He lifted his body with difficulty, his best not to show his complete weakness. What happened to Quirrell and Voldemort? William's mind was in chaos. He could remember practically everything, including the fact that Pruna and Norberta broke free of their bags to save him. "Where are my belongings?" exclaimed William, looking everywhere. Dumbledore wasn't saying anything, which made William worry more than he should. Even with the tiredness in his body, he struggled to get out of bed. He couldn't leave it at Dumbledore's trial. He was not a legit wizard, but the greatest conspirator in all of history. "I think the best thing at this time is to rest," said Dumbledore, approaching William's bed. Both expanding bags, simple items in the eyes of many wizards, but really useful. William checked inside and could see the two creatures inside. "They are both fine," sighed the white-haired man, relaxed. "Harry and Miss Granger told me a bit of their stories, but I still have one version left to know all the facts. I think I know a few things, but I would like to hear it from you." Dumbledore examined William using his eyesight. As a wise wizard, he knew many things, and William was aware of that. "How did you know the stone was there?" "It was simple. They left clues everywhere. The difference is that I have a fresh brain to tie up loose ends, and I don't need to ask half the school like my fellow Gryffindors did." "Hagrid tried to warn me about Professor Quirrell." "Yes, I told him at the time. I'm surprised he actually tried to warn you." "He didn't say your name, Mr. Rosier. He mentioned that it was his own investigation." William's expression froze and his eyes were bigger than before. "Hagrid must really appreciate your friendship." "Yes." William clenched his fists tightly. Hagrid could have told Dumbledore that he was the one who discovered it, but instead decided to hide his identity to save him trouble. "He really is a good friend." "Do you have any questions?" Dumbledore looked at William one last time. "I guess the stone will be hidden somewhere else. This event will not be public, but everyone in the castle will know anyway, and I guess we will receive a prize." William showed his speculations, causing a smile on the wise wizard's face. "You really have a great intelligence. If you have no questions, then I think I should retire. The farewell party is just around the corner and we must show the results of the house competition." Dumbledore turned around ready to leave, but William stood up quickly. "Professor," the white-haired man called. "Yes." Dumbledore turned to look at William. "May I make a selfish request?" William stood firmly in front of Dumbledore, but before he could realize it, his palms were sweaty. He felt the pressure on his body and his legs were shaking slightly, but even with all that he had something to do. Dumbledore looked William over from head to toe. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Let's hear his request before we make a decision." William's mouth fell open, but the words that needed to come out were held on his tongue. "I want to go to Castle Bruxo." Finally the words left his mouth and entered Dumbledore's ears, causing great surprise. "Do you want to leave Hogwarts?" asked Dumbledore in surprise. "Is it because of the reaction of your housemates?" "No," exclaimed William, "it's not about leaving Hogwarts. I just want to study at Castle Bruxo during the vacations as an exchange program, but without a student coming to Hogwarts. I wish that as my prize if possible." "Why? Why the transfer?" asked William to confirm. "No, why Castle Bruxo specifically?" "It's a place, the truth is for." "William, you have nothing to fear, you just have to be yourself with your answer. Depending on the answer will be what I can do. It's for herbology and magi-zoology. Castle Bruxo specializes in those areas. Their fauna is different. I want to learn as much as possible, and I know Hogwarts in the best school, but the rest also have their own strengths. I want to learn and know much more." Dumbledore looked at William and finally let out a long sigh. "I cannot answer at this time. This is not a request I can answer immediately. It not only includes Hogwarts and Castle Bruxo, but also the two corresponding ministries of magic and the Rosier family. Your family must approve the temporary transfer." William hesitated for a moment. Dumbledore had not mentioned anything about money, but William knew he had to have money for his transfer, but that itself was not a problem. After all, he had the lottery prize. The problem itself is the approval of his family, a small detail he had not taken into account. "Well, I will let you rest. About your request I will do my best." That was the last sentence William heard coming from the lips of the wise director. William sat on the edge of the bed in the infirmary for long minutes, shuffling through all the possibilities he could think of, from sending the petition to his mother, to how to get his brothers to help him, he even thought about forging his mother's signatures, but in this world of magic it would be ridiculous. The white-haired man didn't have many options in his mind, so he decided to take one of the white sheets that were nearby and using the pen he wrote a note. "This is my only possibility," he muttered in a low voice. Chapter 35, Chapter 35, Farewell Ceremony. As this time Harry had not been injured, Madame Pomfrey had to help William out of bed. The truth was that William had been in his bed at all times just as she had requested. There were no complaints or requests as other students do, but there was one thing that William did unlike his peers. William would ask about the potions that were used to cure people, he would ask about the treatments and spells used. Madame Pomfrey had no problem answering William's questions. The problem was that every time she answered one question 10 more would appear, making William's stay in the infirmary torturous for Madame Pomfrey. When it was time for the farewell dinner, she herself offered to take William. Even Hagrid, who had come to visit, was surprised to see the nurse helping William. In the great dining room all the students were already gathered at their own tables. William could see Cho Chang waving to him, he could notice the look on his brothers' faces, and he could also see the surprised expression on several of his housemates. The entire large dining room was decorated in Slytherin colors, green and silver, to celebrate the triumph of the Snake House, winner of the House Cup for 7 consecutive years. The large banner covered the wall behind the high table, displaying the Slytherin snake. Quite an elegant decoration, I must admit. Usually silver is the symbol of treachery among Muggle religions, and well, green is green. "You don't know why it's green?" asked Madame Pomfrey, raising an eyebrow as she looked at William, who had no shame in admitting his ignorance regarding the subject. "Never mind." Gryffindor was close to ending the winning streak, but their points flew through the sky when Filch caught Potter and company prowling the corridors. They mentioned about someone trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone, but no one listened to them. Oh, William was surprised. Gryffindor was supposed to lose the house meeting when Potter and co were found in the attempt to get Norberta out of the castle, but William had taken matters into his own hands. The moment Norberta entered William's bag, William thought that Gryffindor would win the cup by a large margin, but it wasn't as he expected. On the contrary, they had Potter and co found in another kind of stupidity. Truth be told, William himself hadn't remembered it when he found Neville petrified on the floor. "Now that I remember, was Gryffindor the winner of the Quidditch Cup?" "No." Madame Pomfrey had her arms crossed and looked slightly annoyed. "Potter returned unscathed from his little adventure to save the school, but it wasn't enough to win the competition. Slytherin played dirty, everyone knows it." "I understand. In William's memories this year's cup will be ruined because Harry should have been unconscious for 3 days, but things were different with William's intervention. Of course now Harry was able to play the last game, but that didn't mean he had been able to win." "You have nothing to worry about, Madame Pomfrey. The crusades of my classmates will be rewarded. Professor Dumbledore may be old, but he is still wise and knows how to reward the efforts of his students." Seeing the confidence in William's expression, Madame Pomfrey had no way to burst his bubble of dreams and hopes. She could only sigh as she shook her head. "I hope you are right, my boy." William used his default set seat, away from all the students in his house, but really close to the best meals. Still he could feel the gaze of his peers and could even hear the murmurs. "I heard he was the one who protected the stone. Wasn't he the son of a Death Eater?" "Are you sure it's him?" "I guess he's different from the others." Fame and popularity were not William's strong point. Hearing the comments, he couldn't help but be slightly embarrassed. Luckily for everyone, Dumbledore arrived before William decided to scram out of the large dining room. Conversations throughout the dining hall ceased to focus their attention on the headmaster. "Another year gone," said Dumbledore cheerfully, "and I'm going to tease you with some old man talk, before you can get started on the delicious treats. What a year we've had! We hope your heads are a little fuller than when you arrived. Now you have all summer to make them nice and empty before the next year begins. Well, I understand that the House Cup is due and the points earned are, in 4th place, Hufflepuff, with 352 points, in 3rd place, Ravenclaw with 426 points, 2nd place goes to Gryffindor, with 450 points, and Slytherin, 472. William was surprised, the scores different from how he remembered them in both the movies and the books. it meant that not everything he did during the year was in vain. He even avoided losing points with the Norberta affair, but that meant there were more ways for Gryffindor students to lose more points. All the Slytherin students were applauding with glee. William himself did not want to turn to look at the faces of the students of that house. He did not like to look at other people's triumphs, and he refused to look at the triumphant face of his brothers. But William was also aware that the cheers and joy of the Slytherin students would only last until Dumbledore began to speak. That also began to give him a certain kind of pleasure. He wanted to see the ruined expression on his brothers' faces. When Ronald Weasley's points came in, all the Gryffindor students were happy. 15 points was not such a big reward to risk one's life, not to mention it was less than what was given in the adaptations, but still the one who was happiest was Percy Weasley the prefect. Hermione won another 15 points, as was foreseen in William's mind. The real Hermione was not like the one in the movies. The little girl was so happy that she buried her head in her arms, either to hide her shame or to cry for joy. No one could tell. Harry Potter won 30 points. Everyone was happy. They had beaten the snakes with Hermione's points, but more points wouldn't hurt. But finally came the last points for the brave Neville. That was the only moment William clapped. Neville was a different boy to the others, weaker, more damaged, and even had a fragile heart, but he still gathered all the strength his body had and stood up to his classmates. Here comes the change of decorations. William stood looking around the great dining hall to witness the change of decorations. He was proud and happy as any boy would be, but he also felt a little bad not hearing his name. Even when he himself made the request for it to be so, he felt a little empty. Chapter 36, Chapter 36, Good News. While everyone was celebrating and rejoicing at the victory over Slytherin, it was William who stood up first and left the dining hall. I suppose you must be happy. Even though your effort only brought a few points to your house, it was enough to win the cup. I remember you challenged Professor Quirrell to a practice duel to win those points. For William could tell the identity of the person even without using his mind's eye to look to his back. Truth be told, he was expecting something like that. Leslie Angeline Rosier, William said in a cold and curt tone, house competition is no different than children's games. I suppose a wise wizard should understand that by now. The expression on Leslie's face turned to fury and anger. She is a fifth year witch, knew very well the argument behind the house war, but she couldn't lose her competitive spirit. You dare to use my full name to refer to me? Leslie bit her lip and clenched her fist. She was recognized among her peers as a cold-tempered witch who was hard to anger. Both her beautiful silky black hair and light blue eyes were very popular among the male students, so she always acted gracefully, but the mere fact of being treated like an ignoramus by her younger brother, who was practically the trash of the family, was enough to make her lose her temper slightly. I think that's the most formal way to address each other within Hogwarts. I would hate to be related to the rest of the Rosier house members. I am a different kind of Rosier, or try to be, William expressed calmly, not looking at his sister. He didn't mind looking at her. There wasn't the need, after all. Neither of them considered the other party as family. Mother won't praise your pride in house. You might even get a prize for Gryffindor's victory. You know, Mother is a fan of house competition, and she herself was in Slytherin during her years of study. I guess she is also unaware of the argument behind the house competition. I will be sure to send an owl with the respective information. She may be able to instruct the rest of my siblings regarding the subject, so I can look forward to a second year with more peace of mind, William mentioned calmly, making Leslie get much angrier, to the point of grabbing the wand from her skirt. But it was the same moment that Professor Dumbledore appeared. William Dumbledore called a family meeting. No, it was just an educational talk. A family meeting is only when everyone is considered to be members of the same family. William moved towards Dumbledore, passing Leslie. This was just to explain about the competition of the houses. I see. Obviously Dumbledore could understand the meaning of William's words, but decided not to interfere. It wasn't his task after all. William followed Dumbledore to the office he was supposed to be in. Take a seat, William. Sure. Dumbledore's office was huge. There was a huge amount of books, documents, and William could even see Fawkes. There was also the sorting hat. William had the idea to go and ask again which house he belonged to, but he desisted immediately. Gryffindor won the house cup, Dumbledore said out of nowhere. William just nodded. The boy's attention was focused on the surroundings. there was a lot he didn't know or wasn't mentioned in the adaptations about your request. William turned his face immediately and looked at the headmaster as intently as he could. He wanted to stretch his mind's eye but didn't dare in front of Dumbledore. What about my request? I know it hasn't been long since our meeting, but I think it will be possible to fulfill your request. Headmistress Gimmerys gladly accepted my request after seeing your qualifications and expressed that she would like to see your development with her own eyes. Dumbledore had a smile on his face and handed over on the table the letter from the headmistress of Castle Bruxo. Now that I remember, do you know how to speak Portuguese? I studied the language during the year. I am not an expert, but I can hold a steady conversation to some degree. I suppose I could become more familiar with the language there. William was reading the letter. The Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, approved the temporary transfer to Castle Bruxo as a symbol of friendship with the Brazilian Ministry of Magic. As for your family's authorization, I have it here. Dumbledore placed an envelope on the desk. William glanced at the envelope and immediately knew its sender. Lord Rosier sent a letter to authorize all of your decisions regarding your future. William stared at the envelope intently. He himself had sent a letter to his grandfather with the request for help, but he never expected the reply to be so rushed. Surprised? Asked Dumbledore. William just nodded. Your grandfather is a very different person to the others. I wasn't lucky enough to be his teacher for a long time, as he was in 6th year when I was his defense against the dark arts teacher. You were my grandfather's teacher. Yes, William, and I must add that your grandfather was a great duelist. He used few spells but always with elegance, and he had an open mind, much more than his classmates. Dumbledore stroked his beard. I can see a small shadow of your grandfather in you. That's why I will allow you to go to Castle Bruxo as you asked. I will take care of everything until your return, but you will have to fulfill your vacation duties anyway. And I will fulfill everything, exclaimed William. He was excited and happy. His dream in his first life was to travel the world, and now he was starting to fulfill his dream. When will I have to go? Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Dumbledore nodded. Before the Hogwarts students leave the castle, I will personally drive you to Castle Bruxo. We will need to make some arrangements, but you will arrive before lunch. Now you may retire and settle all your affairs. Chapter 37, Chapter 37, End of First Year, 1. After the talk with Dumbledore, William began to arrange everything for his trip. He did not have much information about Castle Bruxo besides what they said in the books. He did not know anyone nor had familiarity with the area, but he could not help but be excited. He felt it would be the best vacation of his life. William's first stop was at the dorms, where he arranged all his belongings in the trunk at the foot of his bed. He retrieved from there several of the books he had ordered from the library and a few other things. William, the voice called from behind, gaining the white-haired man's attention. Potter and Weasley. William named calmly but without much interest in the duo. Now that the matter of the Philosopher's Stone had been settled and he had gotten his ticket to travel to Castle Bruxo, he didn't need them. Besides, they wouldn't be of much help in the future nor the important events. William's plans didn't contemplate the duo or trio if they counted Hermione. Hermione and Neville told us what happened. We were wrong. Ron spoke quietly without looking William in the eye. He swallowed hard more than once. I also found a potion next to me when I woke up. Hermione told me it was yours. Yes, I couldn't let one of my classmates die in a forbidden room. I had to use a potion. Neville told us about that, but the truth is... Ron wrung his hands nervously. The words wouldn't leave his mouth, but William knew what the little redhead wanted to say. But then out of nowhere Fred and George appeared out of nowhere, putting their arms around Ron's shoulders. Our little brother wants to say thank you, Fred said, smiling towards William. He's very grateful for your help. George held out his hand towards William and shook it twice. Harry is thankful too. Fred also shook William's hand. And so are we, both twins said at the same time. It was the first time William exchanged words with the twins. They were popular within Gryffindor, but William had no need to strike up conversations with them. I'm George. And I'm Fred. A pleasure, they both said at the same time. They patted William's shoulders and went back to their business as if nothing had happened. They're like that, said Ron, seeing the expression on William's face. The truth is that I wanted to thank you for your help. Me too, Harry interjected. You helped me in the last room against Voldemort. You really aren't like the Slytherins. Hagrid was right. Harry extended his hand towards William. The moment William saw the hand extended towards his side, he had the urge to laugh, but in the end he just shook the hand of the boy everyone called a hero. He didn't want to be on bad terms with Harry Potter. Truth be told, he wouldn't be too useful an asset, but at times it's good to have him on your side, at least to keep a low profile. Well, now that everything is settled, I have to leave you. I still have a lot of things to do before I leave Hogwarts, and I think you also have things to do before you go home. All the students were arranging their belongings to go home. Harry and Ron guessed that William was doing the same, so they didn't let him continue on his way. William's feet led him to the common room, and from there to the library where Madame Pants was standing. William, she said, looking at the white-haired man steadily. I brought them with me, said William, pulling out several books from his bag. They're all there. I'm not taking them home. If I were to go to your house there would be no problem, but taking them with you all the way to Castle Bruxo would cause problems, said Madame Pants. Do you know that too? Asked William in surprise. Practically all the teachers know about it. The director communicated it a short time ago, replied Madame Pants. I suppose you will have your reasons to go to that side of the world. I just hope you won't spend your time locked up in a library. With my library it is more than enough. William let out a small chuckle at Madame Pants's words, but the witch librarian's words were wise. He had to make the most of his time in Castle Bruxo. He would have to be like a sponge to learn everything. Next stop was Hagrid's hut. Everything was just as William remembered, except for Fluffy, who was now tied with a thick chain to a tree. William, exclaimed Hagrid, happily appearing from the side of the hut. He was getting ready to see the students off at the train station. Job every year for the half-giant. I heard the news from Professor Dumbledore. You're going to Brazil. Yes, Castle Bruxo is my stop. There are more species of creatures there to study, and there are also many plants that on this side of the world are not possible to access. An excellent idea. You will learn a lot in Castle Bruxo. I am sure you will come back with many stories. Before I leave I decided to stop by and return Norberta. She saved my life while I was fighting Quirrell. William took the bag from his waist and handed it into Hagrid's hands. What will happen to Fluffy? At William's question, Hagrid couldn't help but shake his head. Professor Dumbledore expressed that he couldn't stay at Hogwarts. Now that there is nothing to protect in the castle, he will probably be sent all the way to Athens, but I'm worried. William smiled when he heard the last comment. Let me guess, Fluffy is shy and you're afraid the other three-headed dogs will beat him up. Yes. I can take him with me all the way to Castle Bruxo. William looked at Hagrid. It's impossible. Professor Dumbledore already arranged the trip for Fluffy. There's nothing to be done. Besides, I don't want to get you in trouble. Well, I guess there's no other way. William understood Hagrid's situation. He spent the time talking to the half-giant before returning to his own business. Chapter 38, End of First Year, 2. William returned to the castle after finishing with the farewell of his friend Hagrid. It would be the last cup of tea that both could drink until the second year. For Hagrid it would be a calm summer, but for William it would be different, a whole summer full of new possibilities, far from the plots of the official history, embarked on a totally different adventure. As William walked down the long corridors he came across a familiar face, one he hadn't expected to see. Are you leaving already? Asked Cho Chang. Like everyone else, replied William. Cho Chang smiled amicably and pulled out a packet of cookies. One of my classmates heard that you wouldn't be going home. Truth be told, we all know you were also on Harry and his friends' adventures, but no one understood why you didn't get points. I didn't want points, William admitted as if it was something normal. It was obvious. Points for Gryffindor don't mean anything to you since the same ones don't benefit you in anything. I guess you asked for something different and now I know what your request was. The girl put the cookies in William's hands. They are chocolate chip. You won't be able to find this brand of cookies in Brazil. Does everyone know? Asked William. Is it a secret? At the girl's question, William nodded his head. Then everyone in the castle will know. It won't be a surprise, but you might be very popular next year. I doubt that's the reason. I am the little Death Eater after all. Cho Chang gave the white-haired boy a tight hug. Good luck, whispered the girl one last time before releasing William and running down the corridor in the opposite direction she came from. William shook his head slowly. looked at the cookie and noticed the small note attached stimulating cookies for study at. William's few and almost non-existent goodbyes were with his friends. Neville also gave William a hug. The white-haired boy for a moment tried to push him away, but it was impossible to hate the boy. Being this innocent was not Neville's fault, plus William slowly felt that they could be friends in the future. The next goodbye was a little more different from the usual ones, and it was not like the others but a small lapse of time later when William was carrying his big suitcase on his back to meet the director at the agreed place for the trip. It was impossible for William not to know whose voice it was. As he turned his head, there she was, the little girl who at some point became the idol of many young people in the real world. It's true what they all say, you're not going back home. Did you really think I wasn't prepared? Asked William with a smile. Life is simply a game once you know the necessary tricks. Have fun with your books at home. There was nothing more to say, she and he knew it. Neither of them were specifically the best to talk about feelings, friendship, and the like, but they both shared only one thing in common: a love of knowledge. Hermione looked at William's back, a small thin back with the dark school robes and white hair as a distinctive color. It wasn't common to see that color on a person's head. When William was in front of Headmaster Dumbledore's office, he couldn't help but stare at the gargoyles he had passed up earlier due to his nerves. Both griffin gargoyles were impressive, and in William's mind he formed the figure of Pruna with that stature. He was obviously excited, but his expression didn't give it away. They are beautiful, don't you think so, William? When William looked to his side, he found Professor Dumbledore, who was also contemplating the gargoyles. In time the griffin with you may also grow to that size, but I'm afraid it won't be possible for it to be inside the school. Yes. William nodded. He knew the headmaster at some point would mention it. It's a wonder he still didn't mention anything about Norberta, but he did know about the existence of the dragoness. I can see you already have all your belongings in their respective places. I guess it's time for us to leave. We have a long journey ahead of us, mentioned Professor Dumbledore, making the gargoyles enable the passage to his office. We will use the visitors' entrance. Minister Fudge himself is waiting for us.